The TLDR, Erewhon holds a long-ass grudge, and he's preparing to enact a third war to try and finish what he started.
That's a long-ass grudge. The ultimate petty king.
Welcome back to the Book on Fantasy podcast.
I'm Addison.
I'm Lorraine, and we are two best friends who explore the world of fantasy through books, shows, and movies, but with a heavy emphasis on books. We are thrilled to be back in Aurelia, picking up right where we left off. It just feels so right to be back with Aelin, Ash River Galathinius, the rightful queen of Terrasen, and the heir to Mala Firebringer. However, this set of chapters has definitely reminded us that ain't nothing can ever just be easy for our favorite FBBQ, and that's fire-breathing bitch queen to you.
You really locked in on that. As soon as Arapin said that, that became your Roman Empire.
I love it.
But you're so right. By the way, if you're a new listener, Lorraine and I affectionately and repeatedly mention how throughout this book series, ain't nothing can ever be easy for our beloved characters. We say that a lot, so just prepare yourself. And also prepare yourself because it seems like ain't nothing going to be easy for this entire book. As a matter of fact, based on this chapters alone, I feel like it's only going to get harder as we move forward, pretty much till the very end of the series.
As a quick reminder, we will be discussing chapters Nightfall through chapter 5 specifically, but there will definitely be spoilers for all the books we've covered so far. This includes The Assassin's Blade, Throne of Glass, Crown of Midnight, Heir of Fire, and Queen of Shadows. Otherwise, this series is brand new to us, so you won't be getting any spoilers for the rest of the series. Furthermore, we would like to remind everyone that this is an adult podcast where we will have adult conversations. Explicit language or potentially triggering topics may be discussed, so please be mindful of that and adjust accordingly. Housekeeping. Our next Empire of Storms episode will cover chapters 6 through 12. Second, if you need to fill the time between our Empire of Storms episodes, then definitely check out our Onyx Storm coverage. Or if you want to revisit the past with a nostalgic book, then we have launched our very first Paging the Past book review covering The Hunger Games. Our Paging the Past episodes will be monthly book reviews to revisit our favorite series from the past, like Harry Potter, Twilight, and much more.
And if you've already listened to our Paging the Past coverage of The Hunger Games, then now would be a great time to start the next book in the series, Catching Fire, which we will be releasing at the end of May. I am personally about a third of the way through the book, and it's so good, I do not want to put it down. So I'm sure once you start, you won't be able to stop. Lorraine and I also wanted to say another thank you to everyone who has taken the time to rate and review the podcast. These past few weeks, we've gotten some really, really kind and thoughtful reviews, and it truly means so much to us. I know we say this a lot. Pretty much anytime anyone says something nice to us, we're like, oh my God, thank you. But it's because we really genuinely mean it, so we're just going to keep on saying it. When I say that those ratings and reviews give me life, I mean it. I've reviewed them more than I care to admit, so I will not tell you how often, but just know it's probably more than you think.
And we also post them to social media as well, and I will be catching up with them shortly, so stay tuned. They will get posted there.
We want everyone to know.
So that is all for housekeeping. So let's get into the episode. We will start with the book report for chapter summaries, and then we will dive into an analysis and offer theories for each chapter. And finally, we will share our favorite moments. With that being said, Addison, please give us the book report.
Happily. Nightfall. Princess Elena Galathinius did not need the gift of her fey ears to hear the prayers of her human army, both spoken and silent. She knew that before the sun would rise, everyone in this valley would be dead. There would be no marker to tell where a princess of Terrasen had fallen. There would be no marker for any of them. They had fought valiantly, but the Dreadlord Erewhon was too powerful, and her father, King Brandon's light, was dimming. Their power was no match for his. Gavin, her love, and her mate came to their tent and told Elena to run, to get behind her father's line so that she may live to fight another day, but Elena refused. She would rather die than live 1,000 more years with a coward's heart. So instead, she crafted a plan. She would make her way across the battlefield to Erewhon himself and use her beloved Gavin as a distraction. And then they would try to stop Erewhon, to buy the continent, the world, the time they needed, in hopes that the next who inherited this war would be better than them. Elena sent up a final prayer that the heirs to this burden would save Aurelia and would forgive her for what she was about to do, which sure would be nice if they told us what she was about to do. Chapter 1. It had been weeks since Manon Blackbeak left a lead Locken in the Oakwald Forest with strict instructions to stay off the main road, make her way to Terrasen and Aelin Galathinius, and most importantly, to stay alive. For several weeks, Elite had managed to do just that, but barely. Her entire existence revolved around fresh water and trying to find what little food was available to her. But it was the memory of Kaltain Rompier's sacrifice, her final act, and the promise she made that kept her moving forward. Elite didn't know what sense exactly picked up on it, but a heartbeat later she heard the boom of what most would call thunder, but she spent enough time in Morath to know it was the sound of wyverns and their deadly riders, the Iron-Teeth Witches. She quickly made her way to an overhang and tried not to move, to not even breathe for fear of being discovered. Once the threat had passed, she continued her trek to Terrasen, but something else stopped her dead in her tracks. Someone was watching her. Someone was following. Lorcan Salvatore had been running from those wyverns for 2 days now. After killing 3 and torturing 1 witch for information, they'd been hunting him ever since. But now he watched a lead Locken. He couldn't reconcile the walking conundrum this girl was. She looked so small, almost like a child, but her eyes scanned the forest with an assessment that was too old and too practiced for a child. Lorcan caught her scent and recognized it, the scent of the Valg. He would study her and learn her weaknesses, and then he would get what he needed from her. So Lorcan began his hunt. Chapter 2. Aelin Ashriver Galathinius extended her hand over a pool in the Oakwald Forest, toying with her drop of water magic. She and the rest of her court had been slowly making their way through the Oakwald Forest to the great city of Orinth, where the heart of her kingdom lay. Her court was not the only ones who accompanied her. The little folk, smaller fairies, followed them and left Aelin small gifts each night. She was interrupted from her reverie when Rowan Whitethorn appeared at her side, and he wasted no time in seducing Aelin. Things get steamy between them, but yet again, they do not let things go further, and instead, all we get are some breathless kisses and promises of more once they're in a defensible position, of course. They then changed the topic and discussed the upcoming meeting they were set to have that evening with the Lords of Terrasen about how to proceed against the ever-growing threat Erewhon posed in Morath. Aedion Ashriver was contemplating everything that had happened since the King of Adarlan had died and magic had been released. He wondered how long it would take for the people of Aurelia to stop fearing it as they had for the past 10 years. He wondered about how the meeting with the Lords of Terrasen would go, but mostly he wondered about his travel companion, Lysandra, the shapeshifter, and what it would be like to be able to change bone and skin and color. He decided to quiz Aelin yet again about the Lords they would be meeting with tonight, much to her annoyance, but they were interrupted by the arrival of a messenger from Lord Darrow requesting that the meeting be moved to a tavern several miles down the road. Though unhappy about the request, Aelin and her court decided to go. Chapter 3. Manon Blackbeak stood at attention as she watched her grandmother's coven descend to Morath. By the looks of it, this visit would be extended, if not permanent. They were here to meet with the Duke and discuss plans for proceeding with the war despite the loss of Kaltain Rompier and the destruction of 1/3 of Morath. Manon knew she had to tread ever so carefully. For the past few months, she had been dancing the line of obedience and defiance, and if the matron caught even the tiniest hint of defiance, it would mean death and worse for Manon and the 13. They entered the council chamber but were not greeted by the Duke. Instead, they were greeted by a handsome and terrible man. But it was not his presence that set Manon on edge. It was his gold eyes, the eyes of the Vol Kings, the eyes of Erewhon. The meeting began and Erewhon informed Manon that Iskra Yellowlegs was on her way to destroy Rifthold and Manon and her 13 were to leave at once to help. Manon had been waiting for this, a chance at battle to see what their wyvern could really do. But Manon couldn't shake the thought of what would become of Prince Dorian Havliard. Of course it mattered little to her. It was war. Liar! Manon used this opportunity to learn as much as she could of Erewhon and her grandmother's plans, and successfully convinced Erewhon that instead of destroying Rifthold, it would be better to paint themselves as liberators of the capital, better to secure allies in the continent than to isolate them. Surprisingly, both Vernon and Erewhon agreed. The 13 made their way to their personal armory and prepared for battle. Manon and Astrid held Ghislaine back and asked her to quickly and concisely tell them everything they knew about Erewhon so the 13 could begin to prepare. Manon then began to don her armor. The mute blacksmith had crafted something so lovely and lethal that she had no idea why, but she found herself saying thank you. She didn't look back at Morath as she took to the gray skies. Chapter 4. Aelin's court made their way back to the tavern where Murtaugh, Wren, and Lord Darrow were waiting. And the meeting went disastrously. Lord Darrow made it clear in no uncertain terms that she was not to step a foot in Orinth, nor even think about sitting on the throne of Terrasen until she was deemed fit to rule by the remaining 5 lords of Terrasen. Even with the support of Murtaugh, she was still 4 votes short. Despite Darrow's disrespect towards her and her court members, Aelin fought to remain calm, keeping in mind her only goal was to keep Terrasen safe. Men, money, and support. That is what her already broken people needed. But as of this moment, until otherwise decided, Aelin would remain a princess by blood, but not a queen. Chapter 5. The disastrous meeting finally ended with Aelin reminding Darrow of one thing. She suggested that he become accustomed to the darkness because if they lost this war, darkness would reign forever. But it did not change Darrow's stance, and tensions were beginning to spill over. Thankfully, they were interrupted by Darrow's messenger bringing them news that the Iron Teeth witches were flying through Rifthold, prepared to sack the city. Aelin and her court began to devise a plan. Rowan would make his way to Rifthold and save Dorian at all costs, while Aelin, Aideen, and Lysandra would sail for Skull's Bay to try and ally themselves with Captain Rolf, the Pirate Lord. Only Evangeline and Fleetfoot were to stay behind for their own safety. They said heartbreaking and tearful goodbyes, and Aelin made 2 promises to Murtaugh and Darrow. First, she would burn them all to ash if any harm came to Evangeline, and second, not if, but when Darrow made the call for Aelin's aid, she would answer. She would not turn her back on Terrasen. She would put her kingdom before her pride and return to help. She would not let Terrasen fall again. As they departed, Aelin noticed a tiny gift left by the little folk, just for her eyes, a small replica of Brandon's temple. She then knew where she needed to go and what she needed to retrieve. Deep in the forest, she saw the white stag's immortal glow, muted in the rain, come to bid her farewell. And that concludes the book report.
What a set of chapters to kick us off.
I know. They didn't waste any time. There was no holding hands, singing songs. There was no sex. There was nothing good. It was just straight into the fray.
I agree with that. Well, thank you for those summaries. And without further ado, let's jump into the analysis portion, starting with some overarching thoughts.
All right. So, is it just me, or does being back in Aurelia feel like coming home? I know shit ain't good, but I'm still happy to be here, you know? I was so excited to be back in Terrasen with our beloved characters. I shouldn't have been surprised in the slightest, but this book jumps straight into the action, and based on where we left off at the end of chapter 5, I feel like we are not going to get a single moment of peace for our characters. I was also actually really sad that Aelin never made it to Orinth or to the White Castle in her childhood home, and now based just on this set of chapters, I'm really worried she won't make it until the very end of the series, because she's going the exact opposite direction. There's going to be so many obstacles along the way. And now I'm just like, oh no, she'll never make it back to Orinth.
Well, we have Darrow to thank for that.
Well, yeah, we're going to talk a lot about him in this episode. Just prepare yourselves. So because we are starting a new book, Empire of Storms, we have some cover analysis and title analysis. To clarify, I am talking about the newer covers, the ones that you can currently buy at Target. Although if anyone has a line on where I can get an original set, hit me up. Let me know.
But otherwise, Addison will be at Target.
Otherwise, Addison will be at Target as usual. And I'm sure at the end of this book, I'll be crying in a Target while I listen to it, because that's what happens to me every damn time. Happened in Queen of Shadows. It happened in Heir of Fire, Hunger Games, basically every book.
We love it.
We love it. We love it. We love a good cry at Target. So don't be disappointed in me, but I don't have a ton of analysis here, and I really tried. I even made my daughter go get her toy magnifying glass, and I CSI'd this cover so hard. But here's what I did come up with. First, the sky is purple. It's dark. It's cloudy. Seems to indicate there's a storm brewing, which is also echoed by the title Empire of Storms. I feel that this is a pretty ominous sign of foreshadowing for our characters. Usually a dark, scary color-looking sky means bad shit's coming. Same thing in Queen of Shadows. Next, you see a ship in the middle of a black sea. The waves are huge, and it looks like the ship is trying to make its way through a storm. I think the metaphor of sailing through the dark and stormy seas is continuing here. They will do it quite literally on their way to the Dead Islands or wherever else they go, but also in terms of facing great challenges, which makes sense because at the end of chapter 5, we know they're preparing to sail. We know that Rowan's going to save Dorian. They're all facing challenges already. Last, and this was probably the most notable thing, you can see weaving in and out of the waves the body of what I can only assume is some kind of sea serpent or monster. I have a feeling They will face some kind of horrible sea creature as they sail towards Skull's Bay. It's possible that it's just a normal sea monster, or it could be a Volg monster that Erewhon has created and unleashed. I'm open to either possibility, and I have some further evidence to support that, which we'll talk about later when we talk about Rolf.
Ooh.
I know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That'd be an exciting little twist right there.
I know. I'm like, how is Aelin's firepower going to work in the ocean? Shit.
Against a sea monster? She
I don't
gonna
know.
dry the ocean up. That's what
She gonna dry it? Next, the title of the book is Empire of Storms. So I actually did a little research. I looked at the definition of empire, and empire is a collection of states, countries, or territories under a single authority. At the beginning of the series, most of Aurelia was part of Otterland's empire, but now that Dorian is king, it opens a door for all of the territories to become independent again and rule themselves. I think a big part of this book will be the territories deciding whether they want to continue to serve Erewhon's empire or Aelin's. I don't think she intends to reign over them indefinitely, but during the war, it's pretty necessary for them to unite pretty much under one ruler. Ultimately, someone's going to have to be the supreme authority of ruling the military. Ideally, it would be Aelin, but I think that's some allusion to that sort of political maneuvering.
I think that makes a lot of sense, especially because we're seeing that this is no longer about individual empires either. This is about a much larger thematic, symbolic battle of evil versus good. And so
light versus dark.
Are you going to be on the good side or the bad side? So,
exactly. I also think the word storms is literal and metaphorical. I think Aelin will face literal storms at sea on her way to Skull's Bay. But in general, all of our characters will have to, quote unquote, face a storm, aka challenges and dangers, as will all the territories on the continent. Next, this book is in 2 parts. Part 1 is called The Firebringer. Firebringer, first and foremost, is a reference to Mala, the goddess of the sun. People often refer to her as Mala Firebringer. We know that Aelin has Mala's power, and so in a sense, she is also a Firebringer. Aelin's use and control of her power has continued to grow in importance, and I'm sure that will continue as we read throughout this book.
And we know Aelin is essentially Mala's heir, basically. She's the only character that we know of who is alive right now who has inherited Mala's power. So I think that speaks volumes for, I guess, like the symbolic significance of that.
That's not totally true, though.
What do you mean?
Well, obviously, as you said, Kaltain's dead, but we're pretty sure Kaltain had firepower. But what is her name? I forgot. Not Ramel. SR. She has firepower.
Right.
Nowhere near what Aelin's capacity is, but she has a very small spark of it. So hypothetically.
Well, but that was also in a bonus chapter, though. So can we qualify that as plot related? And it also wasn't confirmed. But we had a whole book titled Heir of Fire. So
fair enough.
I'm assuming Aelin is meant to be the true heir of the full strength of Mala.
She is. I'm just being an annoying know-it-all. I'm like, technically, that's not true. I'm just channeling my inner Violet Sorrengail. Okay.
Your inner debater.
Just ignore me.
I'd
Just
expect nothing less.
Okay, good.
Well, excellent analysis. Addison, she was like, I didn't have anything to say. She has like 3 paragraphs of stuff to say on the cover. So she did do a lot of analysis, which is excellent because that was not the direction I went. I always forget that we have a cover and title analysis to do every time we start a book. Instead, this is what I said.
Yay.
I love this set of chapters. You can definitely see how we are rapidly moving to a larger scale war that has massive consequences for not just the continent, but likely the universe at large when you think about the keys and what happens if those get into the wrong hands and all of that stuff. I also really loved seeing some of the politics and the strategizing, even if Lord Darrow really annoyed me in chapters 4 and 5.
I think he annoyed everyone. I think he's supposed to.
Anyways, last, we've been watching many of our characters grow and change into larger, quote-unquote, destined roles. For example, with both Aelin, Manon, and Dorian. So I'm excited to see how their plot lines will converge. I can kind of see all the strings from the past books being tied together, like with Captain Rolf from Tab, or a lot of the information from Heir of Fire seems like it's looping back into Empire of Storms now. In addition, just all the past work Aelin has done is going to come into play, I think. And so I'm really excited about that.
Aelin Asher Galathinius.
The Queen of Terrasen.
The Queen of
Almost.
Terrors.
The right.
Almost. Damn it.
All right, so that wraps up our overarching thoughts, and let's get into our chapters, starting with Nightfall. This chapter was really interesting to me because we finally get more of the story that Elena has been alluding to for so long. Before we get into the details, we do have a little bit of background context to provide.
Although I'm happy to finally get some historical world building, I'm not going to lie, I was still disappointed when we didn't get the whole story. I still have never forgotten what we learned all the way back in TOG about how they defeated Erewhon, but I want to know specific details of the moment, how they did it. And when I say defeated, I'm using the term very loosely because we know they didn't really defeat him. They just trapped him, contained him, whatever you want to call him.
If there ain't a body, he ain't.
That's right. So that is a rule in all fantasy books. If there ain't nobody, they ain't dead. Ain't dead. I am hoping we will get more of their story, including a hell of a lot more about Brannon woven in throughout this book. So I hope we get some more flashbacks, POVs like this, or however it's introduced. I want it. I want it, and I want it now.
Everybody's too cryptic.
I know. Why can't Aelin just find a book that says History of the World, page 1? Just read it to us.
Why couldn't Elena have told her this information? I was like, what have you been doing this entire time?
Oh, it's too early to start me on that because I think I wrote that many times throughout this POV, so don't get me started. It gets me charged up, okay?
We'll get there when we get there. So, back in Chapter 50 of Queen of Shadows, while in the Sin Eater's Catacomb Temple, Aelin unlocks a word-marked stone wall with Damaris, revealing Gavin's confessional, which stated A. Erewhon was one of 3 Val kings that had been trapped in Aurelia after the First Great War, and B. Elena and Gavin had not managed to kill Erewhon. They could only contain him in a crypt in Morath using the Eye of Elena, so he's been alive this whole time. We also learned that the King of Otterland released Erewhon with a word key, and then Erewhon took Duke Harrington's body and was biding his time until now. Elena's experience was the second war against Erewhon, and we do know that there was an initial one with Brandon and Maeve, but we have very little information about that one as well. Cain also warned Aelin in her final duel against him back in TOG that she and others were, quote, brought here, all of you were, all the players in the unfinished game. Then at the end of Queen of Shadows, before the King of Otterland dies, he adds additional context by telling Aelin and Dorian, well, now you are back, all the players in the unfinished game. The Galathinius line and the Haviliard, which he has hated so fiercely all this time, why he targeted my family and yours.
Ooh, thank you for that excellent recap. Doing the words
Happy
work.
To be of service. Now, as we start Empire of Storms, this Nightfall chapter gives us some context as to why they were unable to kill Erewhon, and that Elena knew this would only temporarily push back the inevitable for a period of time. The TLDR, Erewhon holds a long-ass grudge, and he's preparing to enact a third war to try and finish what he started.
That's a long-ass grudge. The ultimate petty king.
Guess who's back? Back again.
Erewhon's back. Tell all your friends. Tell all of them, motherfuckers. Someone tell Darrow.
He's gonna learn. He's gonna learn a hard lesson at some point, so... First of all, we get a quick little hint that Elena had intentionally led Erewhon's army to the Black Mountains because after Gavin says, your father's forces could still make it, Elena responds, this valley is now a death trap, and then it says, and she had led them all here. We learn quickly that this was part of a last-ditch plan to do something, especially considering Brandon told Elena, my sun is setting, Elena. You must find a way to ensure yours still rises.
That's interesting because I didn't necessarily read it that way. So what do you think her purpose was in leading them all there to that specific location?
She probably trapped him, right? In the crypt in Morath.
Oh, so you think it was always part of her plan, even prior to this POV, to trap him in the Black Mountains. And so she maneuvered the army there?
I think she probably did have a plan because she had that thought that she's like, they ended up coming. You know, she didn't think that they were going to, but then it did. And then she was like, oh, maybe the gods are still on my side, or I forget the exact quote. But remember?
Oh, okay. So it sounds like Elena did some Aelin Galathinius style planning and was like, I can't kill him.
Yeah.
I'll trap him. The best place to trap him is in the Black Mountains for whatever reason yet to be revealed.
Right.
So we'll try to maneuver his army here and hope he shows up. Okay, I'm down for that.
Right.
I like some Inception level planning.
Yeah. Well, we knew he was contained in a crypt in Morath, and she used the Eye of Elena. Like, that was information
true.
on Queen of Shadows. And so, I mean, how she made this crypt, no idea. But given what we know now, it seems most likely that this battle in Elena's POV is probably the event that trapped Erewhon. I feel like that makes sense.
I would think so, yes. I would think this is the beginning of Erewhon's demise.
Almost. It was not his demise.
Well, temporarily.
Anyways, one of the first interesting details I noted was when Elena thinks such a different time, a different world when the lands had still been full of singing and light, when magic hadn't begun to flicker in the growing shadow of Erewhon and his demon soldiers. We know that the Valg feed off the magic and essence of magic wielders and whatever is in Aurelia. So this detail continues to reinforce that Erewhon was close to overtaking Aurelia at this point. In addition, Elena is concerned about Erewhon potentially burning the royal library, thus burning, quote, the heart and knowledge of an age, and then burn its people, implying Erewhon would erase the history of Terrasen and the continent as we know it, thus also probably eliminating any knowledge of the Valg or past wars with them.
I think it's also worth noting destroying the libraries and their knowledge continues to be a priority for him. It's discussed across most of the books, but specifically in TOG and Com, that when the King of Adarlan invaded, one of the first things he did was destroy all of the libraries. I mean, there's a lot of references to the Great Library of Orinth and all the knowledge that was lost there. I do think you're onto something with what his motivations are. I hadn't considered it from that angle, that there's a purpose other than just wreaking havoc. But I do wonder if there is another reason. Presumably, Erewhon is all-powerful, so why would he care about destroying books? Like, why not just kill or enslave all the people? Even if they get access to the knowledge, who cares? So to me, that further bolsters the idea that there's something specifically he doesn't want anyone to be able to discover.
So I was also a little thrown off as to why Elena seemed to basically have given up hope of winning this war and said, we all die one day anyway. But it turns out that Brandon's power is failing, and she tells Gavin he is close, decades now, from fading. Mala's light dims inside him with every passing day. He cannot stand against Erewhon and win. I find it interesting that she seems to imply that if Brandon was younger and stronger, they may have had a chance to defeat Erewhon, but in his old age, his firepower was too weak. This confirms that Mala's fire in particular is capable of defeating the Valg in a way other magic powers cannot. And we know Aelin has inherited this fire as well, and we saw her use it similarly in Heir of Fire against the Valg prince that was in Narok.
This is also confirmed by the King of Adarlan at the end of Queen of Shadows when he tells Aelin he went to Orinth so that she could burn the Valg out of him. I also feel like this quote finally gives us some information we've been wondering about for ages. This would seem to imply that Brandon is actually dead or quote-unquote moved on to whatever afterlife the Fae have. I've been yelling about where the hell is Brandon and why is he not helping for a long time. Pretty much since book one. Honestly, I thought he got trapped in his animal form when the king eliminated magic.
Yeah, remember when we thought he was a stag?
Hell yeah, we did. And we thought as soon as magic was free, he was going to pop out and save everybody. But it appears that is not the case. Not the case. So I mean, it was worth a shot, you know? It also confirms that the Fae are not truly immortal in the way that Erewhon seems to be. We had a very brief discussion about this back in chapter 39 of Heir of Fire when Rowan briefly mentions his parents. He says, my parents were very old when they conceived me. I was their only child in the millennia they'd been mated. They faded into the afterworld before I reached my second decade. So I do wonder what causes this fading or dimming, and if the Fae possibly have some autonomy in the decision. I know in Lord of the Rings, I'm not super well versed in that, so don't come for me if I get this wrong, but my recollection based on the movies is that the elves and, Fae, they make a decision about when to go to the afterworld or the afterlife, whatever that is for them. So I wonder if it's similar for the Fae in this series. I mean, obviously, we don't know how old Rowan's parents were, but it says they've been mated for a millennia, and who knows, they could have been alive for hundreds and hundreds of years before they were mated. So obviously they are immortal in the sense that they can live for hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of years. But technically, they are not everlasting, I guess.
Right. They're not like infinite
Exactly.
life or whatever it is.
Not like Era
that's a
1
good
seems to
question.
be. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. Next, I believe we strongly speculated Mala was Brandon's lover, but when Elena thinks perhaps her mother's fiery soul had convinced them, I think this confirms Mala and Brandon were in a relationship and Mala is Elena's mother. I can't remember if that was officially revealed in Heir of Fire, Queen of Shadows, so I'm saying it now just in case.
I don't think it's ever been officially revealed or confirmed. I feel like we would remember that.
True.
Yeah, I think that would be a pretty big fucking deal. But I do think
we've
you're
asked
right.
it before, so I was like getting confused about whether it was just a speculation or if it got confirmed for sure.
Sometimes I do get mixed up on what I believe and what's real. I'm like, oh, well, I thought this, and I'm pretty sure I'm right about that. And I'm like, oh, wait, technically that has not been revealed in the text. So, but to our knowledge, it's not been officially revealed. I do think the context of this quote is really important to point out. When she realizes Erewhon has actually arrived to the camp, she thinks perhaps the gods were listening. Perhaps her mother's fiery soul had convinced them. I don't think a mere human's fiery soul would convince the god to do anything, but perhaps a fiery soul of Mala would. And so I think taking that quote, when you read it in its entirety, you're like, okay, yeah, I'm pretty sure Mala is Elena's mother, aka Brandon's lover, wife, whatever you want to call it. So in my head, this is confirmation. I know it's not explicitly stated, but I'm going to roll with that until told otherwise.
Yeah, I agree with this, yes. However, interestingly, we see that Elena has not inherited firepower from Mala. Instead, it says the raw magic in her veins now danced from flame to water to curling vine to cracking ice. Not an endless abyss like her father's, but a versatile, nimble gift of magic granted by her mother. I point this out because it seems Elena inherited magic in her lineage because of Mala, but it's more of like a general elemental magic. Though, as, Mala's daughter, she definitely has a stronger version of it than what we've seen of a lot of characters thus far. I think the type of magic Elena has is what Emrys describes in chapter 11 of Heir of Fire when he's talking to Luca and Aelin, and he said, those powers were gifts, and they were talking about the gods, so from the gods, given to us by them long ago, gifts we needed to survive and were passed down through the generations. Of course, they'd be aligned with the elements, and of course, they'd be watered down after so long. This was in response to Lucas stating most people in Mistward had only a weak version of elemental magic that is really only fun for farmers.
Damn, I miss Luca. He was so funny and sweet.
I know.
I loved him.
Snacks.
I know, snacks, humor. He was great. He's top notch. I hope he comes back.
It also seems like the endless firepower is not necessarily heritable. Instead, it feels like it has to be specifically gifted by Mala, like she did for Brannon and now Aelin in the current timeline. Thus why Aelin is like the true Heir of Fire. Having learned Erewhon had indeed come back to the Black Mountains, this inspires Elena to proceed with a crazy plan, and she asked for Gavin's help, knowing that delaying Erewhon's army was the only way to give them time for her father's forces to arrive, unite with whatever remains of ours, and crush the enemy legions. Apparently, she figured Gavin would be a good enough distraction since Erewhon's hatred for the human prince was rivaled only by his hatred for her father, because apparently Gavin is a badass. I like that we learn he'd been fighting against Erewhon when, quote, no other would, because I think it shows Gavin is very honorable and courageous.
I was very happy to hear this because, not gonna lie, after we found Gavin's confession in the Senator's Temple, he was not on my nice list. Okay, I was not happy with Gavin. I'm still not super happy with Elena. So I was like, okay, well, I can fuck with this. For a long time, he's fought the good fight. So
yeah,
I'll let it slide.
For now. Gavin reiterates that Erewhon can't be killed and they could only try to trap him.
In this conversation, I really keyed on when Gavin says, you heard what your father's oracle whispered. This left me with a lot of questions. Who was this oracle? What else did they say? Is this oracle still living or has another replaced them? If Erewhon couldn't be killed then, can he now? And what the hell is Aelin gonna do about it all? This is also totally random, but Oracle made my mind immediately go to the Stygian spiders. Their interaction with Manon felt very Oracle-like. They spoke in a lot of cryptic language and made references to things in the past and present. And they gave a little bit of this precognitive vibe, sort of this kind of seer oracle aesthetic, I guess. Maybe there's a
Yeah.
connection. That's 100% just a vibe. I don't have any evidence to support that yet. I'm not done with those damn Stygian spiders. I don't know why, but I'm like, there's something more with them. I just know there is. And so,
Yeah, I'm glad you brought them up because I kind of forgot about them. But now that you mention it, I'm like, oh my God, you're so right. What are those spiders up to? What are they
well,
doing?
you better hope they don't find Manon first because they're going to fuck her up.
That's true. I found Elena's response interesting. She says, if we do not act, there won't be anyone to inherit this war. Our magic is failing, our gods abandoning us, running from us. We have no Fae allies beyond those in my father's army, and their power, like his, is fading. But perhaps when that third movement comes, perhaps the layers in our unfinished game will be different. Perhaps there will be a future in which Fae and humans fight side by side, ripe with power. Maybe they will find a way to end this, so we will lose this battle, Gavin, and we will use it as our distraction to contain Erewhon so that Aurelia might have a future. First of all, I definitely have some questions about the gods. Like, what happened to Mala? Did she die? Or did she crawl back through the word gate? Why would the gods abandon them during such a critical time? Do we need to be changing thanks Mala to no thanks Mala? It's implied that the gods of this world may have been beings that came in through the word gates, because in Crown of Midnight, we learn from Baba Yellowlegs that, quote, some theories suggest the mother goddess is just a spirit from one of these other worlds and that she strayed through something called a word gate and found Aurelia in need of form and life.
Ooh, yes, these are all excellent questions. There's probably many more. I'll add to that a question that's outstanding for me is, why was magic failing? Was the source of all magic compromised in some way? In this book, I don't feel like it's been explicitly stated, but heavily implied that magic derives from gods. And so if the gods had abandoned them, that would seem to cause a domino effect of magic having
Ooh,
issues.
yeah.
But why? And what would cause its resurgence? So I'm very curious about all of that.
I wonder if it has something to do with Erewhon in general, too, because
Oh,
we
like
know
his
that the Valve will,
presence.
we know that they've, feed off of magic wielders kind of and stuff, too, to
Ooh,
some extent.
yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. This is a great question, though. Information we'd like to know. We're going to bookmark it and keep an eye on it.
Hell yeah.
Second, this finally clarifies all of Elena's cryptic warnings throughout Crown of Midnight. She couldn't destroy Erewhon in the Valg, so her only option was to trap him. But since then, she must have sensed Aelin had the power needed to do so, and I guess would be able to figure out how to defeat Erewhon. Her thought here about Fae and humans fighting side by side with power also feels like an immediate setup for where this book is going.
I totally agree. I immediately took that as foreshadowing that Aelin will unite humans and Fae to fight against Erewhon. 100. When I read that, I was like, okay, that's going to be part of our journey.
Gavin agrees to the plan after leaving instructions for his most loyal war leader, and they get ready to go instigate their final plan. Also, side note, did you catch what color Gavin's eyes are? Eye color theory.
Yeah, man, I missed that shit. I missed that.
I think we finally have our answer of where Dorian's sapphire eyes came from.
I'm not going to lie. I cannot believe I did not catch that. I think I've just been out of TOG for too long, but I think you're totally right. I think you're totally right. And here I was still thinking his daddy wasn't his daddy. I'll never live that down. But yeah, I think it's a very good theory. I don't know why it wouldn't make sense. I mean, he is a descendant of Gavin, so.
Another small detail I wanted to point out is that the Dreadlord's beasts are described as having poison-slit claws. And we learned the King of Otterlin was creating wyverns in the Varian Gap. And I think these beasts could also be wyverns, or at least close to wyverns, because we see descriptions in a Leeds chapter next that describes the wyverns the witches ride as having poison-slick talons.
Ooh, that's a really good catch. I didn't even think about what they were, how they looked, honestly. I think for whatever reason, my headcanon is that they were basically all just like the Ritterak from TOG. Just these horrible kind of beast monsters. But I mean, that's an interesting corollary description.
One thing I definitely missed about the TOG world was the shiver-inducing writing. The chapter ends with Elena thinking, because for Terrace and for Aurelia, Elena would walk into the eternal darkness lurking across the valley to buy them all a chance. Elena sent up a final prayer on a pillar of smoke rising from the valley floor that the unborn faraway signs of this night heirs to a burden that would doom or save Aurelia, would forgive her for what she was about to do.
Woo! I've said it before and I'll say it again. Damn, it feels good to be back in TOG because that writing is chef's kiss. And what a cliffhanger. I want to know what the hell she was about to do. I mean, I think we kind of know, but I want the line by line. I want the minute by minute. Tell me everything.
Yeah, I want to know how. Because it seems pretty clear that she trapped him. But we don't get any details of like, how did you trap him? What does that mean?
Well, for those of you who are new here, I'm Addison. My favorite thing is true names. I love that shit. True names, like, woo, in fantasy books, they get me going. And so we know from throughout the series that I think it's implied a god or goddess whispered to Elena Erewhon's true name. Elena spoke it. It distracted Erewhon and gave Gavin what he needed, the advantage he needed. Using Damaris and the Eye of Elena, they were able to contain him. So I just want to know how it all went down.
The names.
Nameless
is my brides.
Oh my God. No, literally, since we were in Onyx Storm, I had kind of let that fall out of my mind. And now we're back in TOG. I'm back to just like shouting that out at random. Nameless is my prize. I've not forgotten that. I'm not over it. I know it's going to come back up again.
We're going to find out.
We're going to fucking find out.
Yeah. Anyways, to get back on track, though, I found this really poignant because, first of all, Elena and Gavin decide to bury the truth of what actually happened. I don't agree with that because obviously she just passed the problem down to someone else to some extent, but she probably had her reasons, and I think these are some possible reasons why. First of all, if people knew that the Valg were never really defeated, future generations could probably lose hope. The illusion of victory was used to give the continent peace of mind, I guess. Second, I'm sure they were worried that anyone knowing about Erewhon and the word keys could accelerate their return from someone deciding to go find them for their own use or power, as we saw with the King of Otterlin and Duke Parrington.
This is my very top reason for why they covered it up. As the King of Otterlin proved, humans are stupid. He literally unleashed the greatest evil the world has ever known just because he was young and dumb and was like, I don't know, let's go see what happens. Not to mention, you've got people like Maeve out there that would definitely want the keys for their own personal gain and use. And I imagine Maeve is not the only one, right? It's heavily implied that there are other Fae that, for example, that abuse their Karanom and treat them like slaves. Those seem like the kind of people who would also want the keys for their own personal gain. So that's kind of my top reason, I think, for covering up or giving the illusion that they truly defeated Erewhon.
Third, it's clear Elena, I think, also feels guilty because she hopes those in the future would forgive her. But I think Elena just felt this was the best thing she could do since they apparently were all going to die anyway. All she could do was basically buy the continent time so that one day someone in the future would be strong enough to defeat Erewhon. And it seems like that person might be Aelin. I will say, though, I think Elena could have been a lot more helpful much sooner to Aelin. She was so cryptic, and she literally never told the full truth. She just left it for Aelin to discover on her own. And I was like, you couldn't tell her a little bit more information?
Don't get me started, Lorraine. I'll be hot the rest of the episode. I'll never get over this. I'm so mad. But I agree on both fronts. I think her mentality at this point is to lose the battle now, but win the war later, which I can understand. If the choices are complete and total annihilation or push this burden for a few centuries so humanity can live, it seems like an easy choice at that moment. But also, to your point, as you guys well know, Elena could have appeared at any time to Aelin and just been like, everyone's still alive. You need to kill him. Here's what you need to do. So I'm going to let it slide for now.
Anyways, so that concludes the Nightfall chapter. Moving on to chapter 1. Our first POV starts off with Elide, who continues her journey alone through the Oakwald Forest toward Terrasen. It's been several weeks at this point since she started her trek. As a quick reminder, Elide cannot read, she has no map, and she also doesn't know how to hunt.
Lorraine, don't get me started on this again because I will not be able to stop laughing.
I still have not gotten over that.
I know. I was just going to say, for those of you who are just tuning in for the first time with Empire Storms, at the end of Queen of Shadows, Manon drops Elide off in the forest, and she's like, but I can't read, and I have no map. And Manon's like, oh, well, you'll be fine. Stay off the roads.
Bye.
See you later. So Lauren and I frequently laugh about this because it's just so ridiculous.
Obviously, we're kidding, but on a serious note, she also carries the word key from Chaldean's arm with her, and it's noted in her fevered dreams she could have sworn it whispered to her, saying lullabies in languages that she did not think human tongues could utter. I think we've talked about this before in Queen of Shadows about who can feel the word key. We've asked, like, is it just people with magic or can anyone feel it? I feel like the fact that a lead can feel it points to the fact that a lead does have some magic, and there are some other details later that point to this as well. It may not be a lot, but I think she might have some, since we know that she does have Blackbeak witch blood through her mother's line.
This is a bit of a gut instinct, and it's sort of a common trope in fantasy, but I think there has to be something unique or special about you as a person that allows you to carry and or feel the presence of the word keys, whether that be something like a concentration of magic or being pure of heart or something like that. And so I just kind of feel, based on the combination of those two factors, it seems like Leolide has magic, or will at some point.
I'm very excited to see if she does.
Me too. I want her to fuck everybody up.
Leads revenge.
Especially Vernon.
Vernon.
That's my
get to
dream.
him in a little bit here, but sweet, sweet revenge. I also thought it was interesting that Elide wondered whether she carried a gift or a curse northward as she reflects on Chaldean's words about it being able to open any door. This definitely feels like foreshadowing for the fact that a continental war is coming, and whoever gets these keys in the end will decide whether they serve as a gift or a curse for the continent at large.
I also think it's meant to imply that possessing the keys is an immeasurable burden. To our knowledge, they cannot be destroyed, and possessing them would make you a #1 target for Erewhon. Not to mention the existential threat of what I do with these keys will determine the fate of the world. And so I can imagine being a bearer of a key is quite a big responsibility.
I do have to admire Elide for her grit to continue on despite her hunger and fatigue, since apparently she'd run out of food a week ago, and all she had left was a handful of berries.
I would have to agree. She's extremely resourceful. I really think grit is the perfect word for her. She really is a force to be reckoned with. We talked about this in Queen of Shadows, but Elide constantly goes between this sort of meek and inconsequential person to this really formidable underdog. And you're like, wait, what? Mm-hmm. I don't know. Like, sometimes she's like, I can't read and I have no map. And then she's like, I wish I had a knife so I could slit his throat. And you're like, whoa, okay. You never know which lead you're going to get.
I feel like ever since she learned she's a Blackbeak, she is trying to adopt that, I guess. But it is funny, though, to see her like switch between these two things, because you're like, which one is it? Like, who are you going to be? I don't know. So she also briefly thinks about what the men in Morath had done to her at the end of Queen of Shadows when she refuses to head toward a village because she had seen enough of the kindness and mercy of men. Honestly, this is another thing to commend Elide's courage for, because that was an awful and humiliating experience for her, but despite that, she continues on. Next, I know Elide has always prayed to Aneth, the Lady of Wise Things, and it seems Aneth in return watches out for Elide as well. I think this guidance is exemplified when Elide senses something and then it says, but there, like some thread in a great tapestry had snagged, her body locked up. Similar language has been used to describe tugs on the thread of fate that Aelin has felt at times. And now that I think about it, those threads of fate definitely feel, I guess, divine in nature. For example, Mala guides and helps Aelin, and then we see Aneth do the same for Elide, so.
You know I love that shit, Lorraine. That line from Queen of Shadows still sticks in my head rent-free. A loose thread in the loom of the three-faced goddess. And if you message me about TOG, I'm going to casually work that into our conversation. I've done that to a few people that have DM'd us, and I'm like, I hope you get that reference or I'm going to sound like a weirdo. It does seem like this analogy is continuing to grow and become more present in the books. And I'm psyched. True names, threads of fate, sign me up.
The gods. That's what I like.
I know.
We quickly see that Elide's keen instincts were right because she hears the recognizable wing beats of wyverns and iron-teeth witches on patrol. Apparently those witches were sloppy, though, because keen Elide could tell there were two of them. Tisk tisk. She takes cover under the roots of trees just before the wyverns fly overhead, and she notes that they were heading north toward the Farian Gap. I felt like that's interesting because it's been a couple weeks, and I thought Elide was going to be closer to Terrasen by now. But if she's watching them fly north toward the Farian Gap, does that mean she's actually farther south than we thought?
She would have to be.
I was trying to figure out where she was because I thought she was pretty close. But then the more I read, I was like, I actually don't think she's as close as I thought she was to Terrasen.
No,
And I think she was actually dropped way farther south than I originally thought.
Yeah, the Farian Gap kind of cuts Otterlin in half. So they did not take her hardly anywhere at all.
That far at all. Okay,
No.
okay. Anyways, but those thread tugged on her instincts don't stop there. Just as she steps out again, it says that sense that was not a sense twanged again as if a warm female hand gripped her shoulder to stop. And Elide realizes someone was watching her. So once again, I wonder if this instinct is because of some favoritism from Aneth, or is it because Elide does possess some magic from her witch lineage, and she just hasn't fully realized it yet? Maybe it's both. I'm curious to see. So after this, we switch POVs, and I was very intrigued to get some perspective change because I was not expecting to get Lorcan Salvatare's perspective. Will we finally learn what Lorcan did?
By the way, guys, we don't really know anything about that. It's just in our limited spoiler-free way. We often see people say, what did Lorcan do? And so Lorraine and I have been asking about that for a little while, but we don't actually know. So don't tell us. Don't tell us. But I was also surprised by this. I didn't think we were done with Lorcan by any means, but I definitely didn't expect to get his POV in this book. And so now I'm thinking he's going to be a pretty major character because it's pretty obvious he and Elide are going to hook up in some way. I mean, he's going to try to, kill her and she'll stop him and he'll figure out he's a key and follow her around. I don't know. Something's going to happen between those two, obviously. I mean, I would assume that's what it's setting us up for.
We'll see. So from Queen of Shadows, we know Lorcan's been on the hunt for the word keys, and now we know some of that mission involved an attack on the Yellowlegs Witches' camp for information. From the witches, he learned, quote, twin witch armies now stood poised to take the continent, one in Morath, one in the Farian Gap. The Yellowlegs knew nothing of what power Duke Parrington wielded, knew nothing of what Lorcan hunted. This is also some foreshadowing for what we learn later, so just bookmark this for now.
I also want to point out here that Lorcan still has not figured out he was duped by Aelin and Rowan. He still thinks he possesses one of the 3 word keys in a fake amulet of Orinth. Also, just a quick refresher, Aelin has 1 key with her, Elide has 1 key with her. This topic has been somewhat of a debate for us at the end of Queen of Shadows, but for now, we are presuming Erewhon does possess the 3rd key. We don't know where it is exactly and what he's doing with it, but that's kind of where we landed at the end of Queen of Shadows. It's never explicitly stated, but heavily implied.
Lorcan's observations of Elide also seem to continue reinforcing the sense that Elide's instincts and abilities may be magical, or just at least divinely gifted in nature. He notes she knew he was out there somehow. Interesting. When he wanted to stay hidden, few could find him. In addition, when he gets a whiff of her scent, he thinks human. Definitely human, but he knew that scent. During the past few months, he'd slaughtered many, many creatures who bore its reek. Right after that, as the lead continues on, Lorcan refers to her as a demon-possessed girl. And I guess there's 2 ways to think about Lorcan's observation. One of my guesses is that he's smelling some possible Valg lineage in her because we know the witches are descendants of the Valg. If that's not the case, then maybe Lorcan can sense the word key. But in either case, he doesn't know either of these details yet about Elide, so
I hadn't considered the Valg lineage aspect, but I think that's definitely a possibility. My first instinct was that he was smelling and sensing the word key's presence.
In addition, we know Lorcan was a bastard son and his father was Fae, but we don't know anything about his mother. Since we've been discussing character connections to the gods, I would also like to give a quick reminder that Rowan alludes to the idea that perhaps Lorcan's power may have come from being blessed by Hellas himself, and Hellas is the god of death. At this point, I bet Lorcan and Elide are going to have a little scuffle here sometime soon, since we know he's been tracking her. So just waiting when they're going to run into each other, I guess.
Oh yeah, I'm really excited to see how this plays out. And also if Lorcan will figure out that she has a word key, and if, I'm assuming when he does, what he will do when he finds that out.
All right. So that ends chapter 1. Moving on to chapter 2. First and foremost, I will never get tired of stating Aelin's full name. There's just something about it that gives me the shivers, and I feel powerful just reading her name in Elizabeth Evans' voice.
Oh my
And
gosh,
of course,
yes.
I came with some receipts of epic lines. So obviously at the end of Crown of Midnight, Selena Sardathian wasn't in league with Aelin Ashriver Galathinius. Selena Sardathian was Aelin Ashriver Galathinius,
Yes, dear.
heir to the throne and rightful queen of Terrasen.
Woo.
And then at the end of Heir of Fire, she was Aelin Ashriver Galathinius, heir of 2 mighty bloodlines, protector of a once glorious people, and the queen of Terrasen. She was Aelin Ashriver Galathinius, and she would not be afraid. And then last, at the end of Queen of Shadows, and at long last, Aelin Ashriver Galathinius was home. It just gets better and better every time.
Oh, I'm so glad you did that. I am not even going to lie. I feel the exact same way. I don't know what it is about it, but SJM just knows how to write these lines that they just hit. They have this impact that you just feel in your soul, and I get goosebumps every time. I still randomly repeat in my head, Selena Sardathian wasn't in league with Aelin Ashriver Galathinius. Selena Sardathian was Aelin Ashriver Galathinius. Like, I still hear that in my head, literally for no reason. And I hear that audio from TikTok that has Angel by the Wings by Sia. No, not King Prawn. No, girl, not that one.
Wait, that's not the one you were thinking.
No, I hear that really epic Sia song called Angel by the Wings. It's very like melodic. What? Oh, I'm about to ruin your day because literally that audio, I don't care what the video was. If it has that audio, I'm gonna fucking listen to it. I'm gonna watch it because I love that shit. I'll send it to you. Don't even worry about it. If you know, you know. And if you don't, get with the program.
The only one that comes to mind will forever and always be King Prawn.
King Prawn. Yeah, also, if you're new around here, we love King Prawn. That trend really took off for us. It lives in our hearts and minds.
Forever.
Since you listed them out so beautifully, of those 3 lines, which one is your favorite?
Oh, that's really
I know.
hard. I think I'm going to have to say the Heir of Fire one. She was Aelin Ashriver Galathinius, heir of 2 mighty bloodlines, and she would not be afraid. Oh.
Really? I thought you would go for the end of Calm. I'm a little surprised.
See, that one's just funny to me.
Oh, because
I associate it with King Prawn.
You're going to have to post that KL meme about that.
Yeah. Anyways, which one is your favorite?
Oh, which one do you think? You want to guess?
The Calm one?
No. I like the end of Queen of Shadows, actually. There's something about the build-up for that that's really beautiful. I'd have to go back and reread it, but just the description of how she took like step by step, and then she finally crossed the boulder, and she was finally home at last. And then now Empire of Storms, my high is so like depleted because she didn't even freaking make it to Orinth. She was there for like 2 weeks, and Darrow was like, "You ain't gonna be queen," and then she left. So now I'm not happy.
You will not sit on that throne.
You will not.
You really threw me for a loop on that one. I was not expecting that.
Never let him know your next move.
See you just now.
Jinx.
Okay,
oh
anyways.
God.
So we check in with Aelin Ashriver Galathinius for the first time in this book. Aelin and her court, consisting of Rowan, Adian, Lysandra, Evangeline, and Fleetfoot, are currently camping out within Terrasen's border while awaiting messages back from Terrasen's lords. Aelin sits streamside where she harnesses the drop of water magic she'd inherited from her mother to practice with while maintaining the camp's fire. I loved getting this small reminder because in Heir of Fire, we learned this water magic stemmed from Mab's lineage, and her mother had told her that the drop of water in my magic was my salvation and sense of self-preservation. Aelin had always wanted to be a healer growing up, but she didn't have enough water magic for that to be her path, and her fire power was so much stronger anyway. By the end of Heir of Fire in chapter 57, after Aelin defeats the Valg prince that took over Narok, Aelin finally tells Rowan about what happened to Terrasen, and then she summons her very first drop of water. And that was such a symbolic moment because she was able to use that small gift after she accepted who she really was.
Oh, now I know how the rest of this episode is going to go. It gave me goosebumps again. Just goosebumps everywhere.
In addition, we see that Aelin's water gift is stronger now. And the text says, a ribbon of water fluttered up from the stream, gray and clear, and she wended it through her spread fingers as if she were threading a loom. It feels like the more she embraces her path and her fate, the better she's able to harness that small bit of water magic. She's advanced from harnessing a small drop to now being able to pull out a ribbon of water. And I think this also indicates Aylin's growing power in general.
Also, I think it's important to note she was able to call upon her water magic while still maintaining the fire back at camp, and she notes how that was posing an even bigger challenge. So I think she's going to continue learning how to master it. I don't think it's ever going to become like this really great big power, but it's something that's meaningful, as you pointed out, to her symbolically.
Next, I thought it was super important that the little folk, who have always kept watch over Aylin, basically from the very beginning of the series, have continued tracking them and leaving gifts for them since they entered Terrasen. They leave other gifts within the set of chapters, but here we learn that so far they left a crown of forest violets that Aylin gives to Evangeline. Then that was followed by 2 more crowns for both of them, and then they'd also left a small replica of Rowan's hawk form. The little folk don't speak or anything or really show themselves very much, but I think their gifts have always been symbolic by either foreshadowing something, but also serving as some kind of like divine acknowledgement that Aylin is walking a path that is laid out by fate in a way. For example, I think the crowns represent Aylin's future as the Queen of Terrasen, even if we know she will have to face resistance from, the other lords and likely a lot of other people first. I wonder if by Aylin gifting Evangeline a crown, though, this is symbolizing some sort of royal future for her as well. I also think the replica of the hawk both symbolizes that the little folk accept Rowan, and it kind of foreshadows Rowan's departure at the end of chapter 5 for his mission to help Dorian.
I completely agree with your analysis here. I think it's really spot on. We'll talk about each individual gift when we get them, but I do think you're right. Sometimes they are just acknowledgments, but other times they are distinctly meant to warn or foreshadow something or indicate something in relation to whatever the gift presents itself as. We know the little folk have always been a big part of Aylin's character. For example, the night her parents died, we know she was running away from the assassin, and when she tripped over the roots and branches, there's a description of how the little folk helped untangle her. Back in Heir of Fire, they followed her throughout her journey to Mistward, and then even way back in TOG, they left her those tiny little white flowers on her very first journey to Rifthold, and so they've always been with her symbolically, and it seems like, obviously, now that she's embraced who she is, they're being a little more communicative with their gifts.
So next, Rowan comes over to Aylin, and we get a conversation between them that is both lightly spicy and serious as well, as it shifts to discussing politics.
I also thought it was absolutely hilarious that Lysandra and Adian are so sick of the long, heated glances that they're basically like, yeah, I'm literally going to go be anywhere else but right here, right now. And when Aylin's like, they would make up excuses like they needed more logs for a fire that did not require wood to burn. That one in particular had me cackling.
We're really getting the slow burn romance with Rowan and Aylin, but I really enjoy it for now.
I was going to say, really? You really, really enjoy it?
I love their teasing banter about, taking a bath in the pool and how Rowan reminds her, what I said still holds. I'm not taking you against a tree for the first time.
I thought I had experienced a slow burn romance before and I was patient enough for it, but Throne of Glass is really testing my patience. Every time Aylin and Rowan find an excuse not to seal the deal, and I said it in the last book and I'll say it again. If I found out Erewhon, the Dark Lord, the Dread Lord, was still alive and we may perish at any moment, I'd be doing it. Anytime, anywhere, period. Against a tree.
Against all the trees.
Against every tree in Oakwald Forest, okay? If the world's gonna end, you know how I'm gonna go out, okay? I'm just saying. And meanwhile, they're like, let's wait till we're somewhere defensible. Like, are you kidding? What does that even mean? Get out of here with that nonsense.
I think Aylin was correct when she said, I think you're a sadist, Rowan. They both
is.
Are, honestly.
Oh my God, truly. Not here for it.
I have some additional thoughts to add for the mate theory discussion, but I will hold off on that for a moment for some political details first. Aylin and the crew were avoiding inns and main roads since there were still Adarlanian soldiers marching out of Terrasen since Dorian's decree at the end of Queen of Shadows freed all of the conquered kingdoms, but Dorian's decree didn't necessarily mean Adarlan's soldiers would be loyal to Dorian, considering he is a brand new king. Aelin thinks the soldiers might very well march right back here, might choose to ally themselves with the monsters squatting down in Morath rather than their true king. We also learn that they are proceeding very cautiously with the meeting that they'd set with a few trusted lords because after 10 years, there's a lot of uncertainty. So, quote, they were still taking no risks, even with the lords who had once been her uncle's bannermen. I think this also serves as some light foreshadowing that this meeting is not going to go as smoothly as Aelin hopes.
We'll discuss this more in depth before their meeting with Darrow at the top of the chapter, but this exact situation was foreshadowed back in Heir of Fire, so we'll talk about it more in depth there. And Lauren and I have a lot of thoughts about how all of this unfolded, so we'll save it for when we get there.
Rowan proceeds to ask if the word key she now wore all the time was bothering her, to which Aelin responds no, but it does remind her that this is another thing that they need to be cautious about because we know Lorcan has been hunting the word keys, and honestly, this feels like a collision course coming soon. Lorcan is obviously going to be pissed when he realizes that his is fake. But now that he's tracked a lead, it feels like it's only a matter of time before he potentially does get a hold of her real word keys. So
I do wonder if / when Lorcan discovers he's been duped, if he will make a beeline for Terrasen to confront Aelin and Rowan. Now, of course, Aelin and Rowan won't be in Terrasen, so I don't know if Lorcan will know that. I don't know how he's getting information, but I imagine he's not going to be very happy. I know we discussed this quite a bit in Queen of Shadows, but I really can't get a read on what Lorcan's motivations are. I know he tells Rowan all that bullshit about Maeve and protecting his queen, but I don't buy it. I feel like there's this undercurrent of something else going on with Lorcan that he's not communicating. Part of this is just because I love a bad boy, and in my mind, I'm like, no, but he's good. But daddy, I love him. Okay. That's the vibe he gives. And so I want to know more about Lorcan, and I'm curious to see what he's going to do because he's going to figure it out eventually.
Right. It's only a matter of time. So I agree. I do believe him about the Maeve thing, but I don't think that's all of it. I do agree that there's probably more to his plan here that we have yet to learn. So I guess we'll just have to keep reading and find out. I did think it was kind of funny, though, and also scary that Evangeline looted through their saddlebags and found the word key. And she's like thinking it was just a pretty necklace. She's like wearing it so proudly.
Oh my God.
And I was like,
God.
I guess it seems like as a human, she probably didn't feel anything from the amulet. So it was a close call, but you can wipe the brow and sigh in relief.
Well, I think Aelin was more worried that Evangeline was wearing it in Oakwald, and they let her kind of wander off a little bit in the woods, so anything could have happened to her.
Oh, yeah.
Right? She could have been taken, etc. So
Yeah. The thing that I was thinking more specifically about was like kind of going into the conversation of who can feel the amulet versus who cannot. And I feel like Evangeline, being a human, I don't think she could feel the keys in the same way that Aelin and
I agree. It doesn't seem like it
can. So
yeah.
Ultimately, Aelin's stressed about the upcoming meeting and worries about all of the meetings and responsibilities that come with being a ruler. But she also worries about Erewhon and his larger plan. Aelin thinks, what is he waiting for? Is he letting us gather our strength, letting me return with Aedion to get the Bane and raise a larger army around it, only so he can savor our utter despair when we fail? She also wonders why no one had claimed the blast at Morath as they're doing. We do know that Erewhon is waiting for his witch mirrors to finish being constructed, and we see in Chapter 3 that he is strategically planning how to gain control over the other kingdoms again. But obviously, Aelin doesn't know that at this point. I also wonder if he's trying to find another person to breed Shadowfire from.
I think you've got several things going on that are impacting Erewhon's decision to act now. As you pointed out, he is waiting on the witch mirrors. I also think losing Kaltain, the Shadowfire, and subsequently the word key massively set him back. Not to mention a significant chunk of Morath has been blown sky high. And a lot of the Val probably died, and whatever monstrosities he was creating within the mountains, like whatever quote-unquote babies the Yellowleg clans gave birth to. It also seems likely he is waiting until he has all 3 word keys, or at least 2 of them. I think prior to this, he was from a great position of strength because he had 2. So even if someone else had 1, 2 against 1, I mean, feels pretty...
Right.
Feels pretty stacked to me. But obviously he suffered quite a few losses with Kaltain doing her Shadowfire thing, which God bless her. Thanks, Kaltain!
Yay! Yeah.
We also know that he's been made aware of Aelin's return. This became public knowledge after she killed Narok back in Heir of Fire. I'd be willing to bet he's waiting to see what she does and what her magic is capable of. We know from Nightfall that Brandon's magic, aka Mala's power, is the strongest weapon we know of that can be used against him, and he really has no idea how much power she actually has and what she can do with it. It's very possible there are depths and abilities Aelin doesn't even know she has, things she can tap into that could be lethal or at least really hurt Erewhon. I also wonder if the attack on Rifthold was designed at least in part to draw her out, because he knows that they have a connection with Dorian. Maybe it's a long shot, but I do wonder if there's some of that at play as well.
Yeah, that's a good thought. I wouldn't be surprised because Erewhon's obviously been around for a long time. He's seen a few wars. He's
He's played the game.
Exactly. So can't trust Erewhon. To move on to some relationship notes between Aelin and Rowan, we've definitely had discussions in Queen of Shadows where it feels almost undeniable at this point that Aelin and Rowan are mates. We still just don't know how that's possible. There are several notable lines. For example, in this chapter it says, "A thrill sparked through her blood brighter than any magic." And then later on it says, "The desire was only the start of it. Rowan made her magic sing." And maybe that was the Karanon bond between them, but her magic wanted to dance with his. And from the frost sparkling in his eyes, she knew his own demanded the same. And last but not least, Aelin admits to us readers she'd been in love with him for a while now, longer than she wanted to admit.
Aww, I was so happy to finally read Aelin admit that she was in love with Rowan. I know we pretty much knew that already, but actually reading it made my heart so happy.
But anyways, all of these lines are significant because they demonstrate Aelin's magic isn't just reacting to Rowan's power because they are Karanom. It feels like it's drawn to him in a way that mirrors what we've seen in other mate bonds from the Massverse. I will continue patiently waiting for official confirmation in the meantime.
Poor Lorraine, you've been waiting patiently for so long.
Literally forever.
It better be in this book, because if not, then that probably means it won't be until Kingdom of Ash. You know that, right?
Yeah.
I don't think Aelin and Rowan are
Tower
done. Yeah. Wouldn't that be funny?
Hale's not going to find that out.
Oh, you're going to have to wait months. Nah,
Yeah,
it'll happen in this book.
I also love seeing how important Aelin's little chose family is to her while she observes Evangeline pet Lysandra in her ghost leopard form. She thinks her family and her kingdom, two dreams long believed lost. She realized that she would do anything, ruin herself, sell herself to protect.
Ugh, absolutely loved and hated this line. It made me physically ill because this feels like foreshadowing for some absolute nightmare shit that will go down and will happen to Aelin. I was like, wow, that's so sweet. Also, I hate everything that's happening right now.
It's very ominous. Before we switch POVs, we get one more morning when Aelin finds another gift from the little folk. This time she finds a tiny wyvern figurine. This definitely foreshadows immediate circumstances when Aelin learns about the attack on Morath in Chapter 5. But I also think it foreshadows a longer-term plot where we know we are being set up to see Aelin, Terrasen, and the continent fight against the Valg in what will be, I guess, the third act of this ancient war.
I also wondered if it was foreshadowing that they're going to have a run-in soon with the Wyvern. We know from Elite's POV earlier that the witches she saw flying overhead were headed towards the direction of Terrasen. So I did wonder if it was a little foreshadowing about that, but it also seems more likely it's probably about them going to Rifthold.
Aelin knows this too when it says, Aelin Galathinius, Queen of Terrasen, knew the time would come to prove just how much she'd bleed for Aurelia.
You already know if they're using her whole name in a line, it's good and it's bad. This absolutely feels like foreshadowing that something bad is specifically going to happen to Aelin, or she's going to make some big sacrifice to save her family and Terrasen, which, to be fair, is pretty on brand for her. I mean, would that shock and surprise anyone? No.
Next, we switch to Adian's POV, who reiterates the tension Aelin feels over this impending meeting with Terrasen's lords. Through Adian's thoughts, it's clear that despite magic being free again, magic wielders were still hesitant to show themselves or any of their magic to the public out of fear. He thinks most people now knew that the King of Adarlan had wielded his dark powers to repress magic these last 10 years, but even so, he doubted those who had suffered its loss, then the extermination of their kind, would comfortably reveal their powers anytime soon. I think this idea also feeds kind of into Darrow's reaction and attitude later, because it's clear magic wielders are feared by regular humans. We saw a similar perspective and concern from Chaol at the beginning of Queen of Shadows as well, but it's clear that the oppressive conquering and anti-magic sentiment the King of Adarlan created for the past 10 years has left lingering scars, and most people, even magic builders themselves, view it as something bad or something to be concealed rather than something to be used for good. For example, when Adian thinks that it would take his companions or the girl in the town square using her water to, quote, show the world it was safe to use magic or that it could be helpful to the world.
This whole thought process was really interesting to me because I always thought people would be so happy and relieved to see magic return, especially because it was so beneficial, right? Medicine, growing crops, I mean, just for a variety of things. I hadn't considered that they would actually still fear it and fear the potential repercussions for using it. But when you think about it, it makes perfect sense that they would still feel this fear over using it, this terror, because, I mean, they were literally burning people that had magic. I mean, they were lining them up, killing their families. And so it makes logical sense. I just really hadn't made that conclusion until Adian pointed it out. When he did, I was like, oh, yeah.
I don't think they've ever seen anybody use it for good either. Even the king was a human, but he used like a dark magic and then just conquered all these kingdoms and stuff. And so I think it's been a long time since anybody has been allowed to use it and also seen it be used in like a helpful, good way, which is really sad. Adian shifts his thoughts to Lysandra and her shape-shifting magic, which has been long feared, but also sought after from courts in every land to use shapeshifters as spies and assassins. We were getting some twinges of romance throughout Queen of Shadows, but I feel pretty ready to say there's a romance brewing for Adian and Lysandra. He's like smiling while he observes her, and he notes that Lysandra frequently found ways to annoy him in her various forms. So consider me on relationship watch again.
Ooh, sign me up too. I'm ready for everyone to kiss. I'm ready for Manon and Dorian to kiss, Adian, Lysandra, and definitely Aelin and Rowan. I'm ready for it all. So sign me up.
I also thought it was notable that Adian thinks he often wondered what it felt like to be able to change bone and skin and color, because Adian does not have another form. Aelin and Rowan can shift into one other form, and Lysandra obviously can take many forms, but Adian is mostly human other than his heightened senses and strength from his Fae lineage. He doesn't sound jealous or anything, but honestly, if I was him, I would definitely wish I could shift forms too, or like just be curious about it. He then moves on to observing Aelin, noting that she'd gone quieter the closer they got to Terrasen. We learn that the Bane is currently camped just outside Orinth, where they are working on strengthening the city's defenses and also awaiting orders. I also found it notable that he notices her shift at the mention of the Bane, and he knew how heavily it weighed on her to ask others to die for her as queen. Adian thinks she had slaughtered and fought and nearly died again and again for the past 10 years. Yet he knew she would balk at sending soldiers, at sending him to fight. That, above all else, would be her first test as a queen. I think this will be a big part of Aelin's journey in this book, learning to make decisions as a ruler, which involve asking others to risk their lives under her command. I would imagine Aelin is also still struggling with the guilt she feels for quote-unquote hiding for the past 10 years, knowing her people were continuing to fight for Terrasen's cause without her. However, we also see that Aelin has matured tremendously and takes her role moving forward really seriously. We've also loved Adian and his loyalty, but I thought it was so sweet that he got a tattoo from Rowan that had, quote, all their names entwined in a complex Terrasen knot right near his heart. I love this. I think it perfectly symbolizes how much Adian loves their little family and court, but I think it's also symbolic of Adian embracing his heritage as part Fae and this brotherhood that he shares with Rowan, since we know Rowan started tattooing the story of his past and loved ones as well.
I could not have said it better myself. I immediately took notice when he mentioned the tattoo, and I just love the metaphor that no matter what happens, he will always carry them with him close to his heart. I know. I'm just prepared to be so emotionally damaged by this book. I feel like I'm just like white knuckling it already because I just feel like it's going to go really bad.
Someone's going to die. I feel
Don't say that. No. Don't say that. We are kind of primed for that, though.
It's been a while since we've got like a bigger character's death.
Yeah.
You know? Adian requizzes Aelin, much to her annoyance, about the lords they'd be meeting with, and this is when we get some insight into Lord Darrow as well as Murtaugh and Ren. So we first met Murtaugh and Ren in Heir of Fire, but we learned Murtaugh was, quote, a farmer's son, but married Ren's grandmother. He isn't an Ellsbrook by blood, but he still commands the seat, though he's trying to get Ren to take over. Darrow is the wealthiest landowner after Aelin, and he is important because he holds sway over the other surviving lords after his years of navigating Otterland over the last 10 years of their occupation. Darrow was also apparently King Orlyn's lover, and Orlyn was Aelin's uncle, or great uncle, I should say. And it's described he became a different man after Orlyn's death. He's a hard bastard now, but still a fair one. Much of what he's done has been out of his unfading love for Orlyn and for Terrasen. His own maneuvering kept us from being completely starved and destitute. I am going to really try and keep this in mind moving forward in this book because, let me tell y'all, after chapter 4 and 5, I am not a fan of Darrow in the least at this time.
Same. We'll talk about this more when we get there. However, I'm just going to prepare you all. I am going to play devil's advocate a little bit and defend Darrow's perspective. And this is the first note that will apply to understanding Darrow's perspective and explains some emphasis on some of his bad behavior.
Rowan eventually gives the warning call to signal someone was approaching, and it's noted that they all fell into their roles based around the old ways of the Fae that Rowan had been teaching them. He says, reborn here and enacted now as they fell into the roles and duties that they had sorted out and decided for themselves. Rowan emerges with a messenger wearing Darrow's crest of a striking badger. I would like to point out some badger symbolism. So
there's something I never thought I'd hear on this podcast.
In Celtic mythology, badgers are associated with wisdom and protection. And badgers in general are animals that can be pretty ferocious and territorial. And I think that perfectly describes the energy we see from Darrow in the next chapter.
Also important to know, badgers are mean as hell, which also matches Darrow perfectly.
So, first of all, I thought it was noteworthy that the messenger realizes who Aelin really is and he bows because I think that symbolizes his respect for her and potentially signifies that more people in Terrasen would recognize her, even if Darrow signals she will only be accepted if the lords recognize her. And I also think this may foreshadow this idea of popular acceptance by the people versus political acceptance with laws and procedure. Ultimately, the messenger reveals a change to move the meeting to a tavern in town at Ren's request out of his concern for Murtaugh's age and health. It's also clear that this is not just about Murtaugh because the messenger says Lord Darrow is impatient. Being outside of Oryn's walls makes him anxious, makes us all anxious these days.
I also feel like the request to move the meeting to the tavern is a bit of a power play by Darrow just to make them come to him instead of the other way around, right?
Yes.
Knowing what happens with Darrow, I feel like his ego cannot stomach being summoned by a 19-year-old girl. And so I feel like that's a bit of a power play for him.
Yes, I agree with that. They agree to the change, though Adian warns they need to scout the tavern first, and that ends chapter 2. Moving on to chapter 3. Our least favorite grandmama, Granny B, arrives at Morath for a meeting with Duke Parrington.
And if you're new around here, one thing you need to know about me is that I hate Granny B with a passion. Honestly, at this moment, I hate her more than Erewhon. I hate her, okay? I'll never have a nice word to say about Granny B. I don't care what she does. There's nothing she can do. Literally, she could kill Erewhon and I'd still hate her. I'll never forget what she did to Astrid. I don't know why I have this really weirdly intense loyalty to Astrid, way more than what is warranted given her page time. I don't care.
It's because Granny B is just cruel.
She's pure evil.
She's just dumb, also. I'm like, do you not see what Erewhon's doing to you? Come on.
He said she's just dumb as hell.
So Manon notes Granny B's eyes are gold-flecked onyx. As a reminder, we've learned that pure gold eyes are the eyes of the Val Kings, like Erewhon, and among the Blackbeak clan, this is a rare and highly coveted eye color. Manon is the only witch we know of to have wholly gold eyes, likely indicating a particularly strong lineage to the Valg. And now that I think about it, maybe even Erewhon. Gold-flecked onyx eyes are also highly prized among the Blackbeaks, and it's considered lucky. They are prized as a sign of the Blackbeak's purest bloodline. We also learned in Queen of Shadows when a Valg-infected Roland attacked Manon in the 13, those with gold flecked or pure gold eyes were less affected than the witches with ordinary eye colors like brown, blue, or green. So there's an immediate tension, as Manon notes, rare, so rare for them to track her and guard her, referring to Granny B's coven, following her closely. We also learn that Granny B plans to stay for a long period of time in Morath. I'm taking this as further confirmation Erewhon is making bigger moves soon, as he does later when he sends the witches to attack Rifthold. I wonder if this also means that the witch mirrors are possibly close to being done. I would also like to note Manon's internal thoughts as she thinks about Granny B's cruelty towards Astrid and her stillborn witchling, which she'd hid from Manon in addition to not being entirely truthful about the explosion at Morath. We've seen an increasing degree of disobedience and an evolving change in Manon and how she thinks of herself and the world. She's becoming more defiant, and dare we say she's growing a heart now. But in withholding information about the explosion, Manon thinks defiance. That's what it had been these past months. If the High Witch learned of it, she'd tie Manon to a post and whip her back until her skin was hanging in strips.
Ugh, why you gotta end it right there? Yuck. I am also worried about what this means for Manon in the 13. By the end of Queen of Shadows, I feel like they were beginning to ever so carefully disobey Duke Parrington's orders. But now with Granny B here, I feel like they'll have no choice but to obey. And I'm very, very worried that Granny B will actually order the 13 to breed with the Valg. And then I'm like, what are we going to do about that? Her presence there makes me really anxious. And so I feel like Manon's going to be put in a position where she has to go along with it or she has to fight her way out, which neither seem like good options for her in the 13.
I agree. I also thought it was notable that Granny B describes Kaltain as being leashed to Duke Parrington, indicating she knew Kaltain was under Parrington's control. However, Manon, Elide, and the 13 are really the only ones who knew Kaltain was able to break out of the control that Erewhon had over her with the word key. I think this is important to remember moving forward because Manon is uncovering the true motivations of Erewhon as Aelin has separately. And it seems like this will continue to drive the divide between her and Granny Blackbeak, who continues to be kind of like this obedient pawn to Erewhon, even though I think she thinks she's been told the truth. But I also think it speaks volumes that Manon doesn't tell Granny B any of this information because she doesn't trust her.
Oh, absolutely. I feel like the Manon and Heir of Fire would have told Granny B immediately. And in a very short period of time, she has changed dramatically. And I think we're going to continue to see her change for the better. I even think about that last line of her POV where she's like, she walked out of the meeting room and it did not occur to her much later to protect the matron. She was like, oh, bye, Granny B. And I'm like, yeah. Such a huge departure from her character at the beginning of Heir of Fire. Heir of Fire and Manon would have never done that.
You're seeing some shifting allegiances, it feels like. To briefly jump back to the Shadowfire point, I do wonder what Erewhon is going to do to replace this power because it seems like Shadowfire was a key part of his plans with the Witch Mirrors and, obviously to quickly conquer the continent.
My guess would be he's going to try and find someone else who has fire magic and can hold a key like Kaltain did. Target number one, honestly, is probably Aelin. I don't think there are many people that can do it, but there are maybe a few others out there. And now that magic is free, it will probably be even easier to find them. And again, I'm talking like a handful of people, but he was able to find Kaltain despite the fact that magic was not freed. And so now that magic's free, it feels like it'll be easier for him to find someone. And we don't know, obviously, a ton about the keys and how they work. He may not even need someone with fire magic, per se. He could be someone with just a lot of magic, like maybe Dorian. We don't know, so.
Right. Upon arriving at the council room, Manon and I were shocked to see Vermin Vernon and, quote, a golden-haired man, his skin pale as ivory, waiting for them. Most notably, this golden-haired man has gold eyes twinned to Manon's. The eyes of the Valg Kings. Manon is immediately on high alert as she quickly pieces together that Duke Parrington was just a body for the Valg King that she learns is named Erewhon.
Just so you know, that wasn't scripted. We both just instinctively knew to do that. I just want everyone to know that. Even though we knew back in Queen of Shadows he was back, something about him being there in the flesh with his gold-ass eyes, like being out of Duke Parrington's body makes it even more terrifying. Also thought it was kind of funny when he was like, I was sick of wearing that sagging meat. I was like, oh, that really gives me the ick. I don't like when people talk about like flesh, like meat. I feel like this happens every time, like in books, they're talking about whipping and they're like, their back was a slab of meat. And I hate that. I don't like it.
Vernon begins scurrying to be respectful for the first time in his slimy little life. But Manon thinks perhaps now that the Lord of Parenth realized what manner of monster held his leash, he was desperate for allies. Knew perhaps that Manon might have indeed been a part of that explosion. This is kind of how I would interpret Vernon's change in attitude. Now that he knows he was not dealing with a mortal Duke Parrington, but a literal Valg king, I would imagine Vernon is sweating, all caps. Because as far as we know, Vernon is just a simple human. And a simple human ain't shit to a Valg like Erewhon. So he's going to have to tread carefully. Erewhon may use him as, I guess, like a pawn and maybe a mouthpiece to do his bidding, but I think his time is running out for when he outlives his usefulness.
I also can't shake the feeling that at some point Vernon no longer has a choice on whether he wants to serve Erewhon. Manon thinks the voice was carnal and lovely and cruel, but the tone, the demand in it, something in Vernon's smirk now seemed too strained and his tan skin too pale. Something about the way this is phrased and worded makes me think that Vernon might be leashed in the same way that Caltaine was. I don't know what kind of process or, what would have changed that would cause that. It was just those two things combined really made me wonder if Vernon now no longer has a choice.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. As far as whether Vernon knows about what Manon did with the Morath explosion, I don't think he knows Manon was involved because someone like Vernon would absolutely use that against her for his own advantage, especially now that magic is free. Elite is gone, and he basically has like zero leverage or useful to Erewhon as a human. So I don't think he knows.
I agree. I doubt he knows either. If Erewhon doesn't know, then I highly doubt someone like Vernon would. I just don't know how.
True. I also noted that Manon senses no darkness, no corruption leaking from him, referring to Erewhon, as if he were powerful enough to keep it contained, unnoticed save for those eyes. This aligns with what the King of Otterland revealed about how Erewhon could hide inside a body, quote, like a snail in its shell. To get to the point of this meeting, Erewhon reveals his plans to take back Rifthold using the witches. It's decided Manon would take her 13 and 2 escort covens to limit knowledge of their true numbers. Manon also asks what would happen to Dorian, and Erewhon states he wants Dorian brought to him, quote, if he survives the attack. Manon pretends like this doesn't matter, but obviously you know it does. She wouldn't have asked about Dorian if there wasn't a little tug on her heart there.
Oh, I know. When I read that, I was like, girl, quit lying. Your ass flew all the way to Rifthold to tell Aelin that Dorian was still inside the Valg Prince. Then you flew there again just to stare at his bedroom window. So get out of there with that. He doesn't matter bullshit, okay? I don't want to hear that from Manon. She's in denial so hard. Lies.
The conversation shifts to a discussion of Aniel, whose lord at this time has still not declared allegiance to Erewhon. We know this is referencing Chaol's father, but Erewhon also seems to indicate he believes they'll cave soon because, quote, their keep along the western falls of the lake still bears scars from the last time my armies marched. Its lords know how easily I can again turn his city into a charnel house. I don't believe we've ever gotten any historical war info about Aniel and the Valg in past books, but this implies there have been past conflicts between Erewhon and his Valg army in that area. This also makes it clear Erewhon is planning to make Aniel a stronghold for his forces, just as he has done with Morath and Rifthold.
This information makes me feel that for some reason, maybe purely just based on its location, that Aniel is strategic and control of it is really important. So I think we're going to continue to see Aniel becoming a larger player in the war.
Manon points out that Erewhon's control only stemmed south of Otterland and asks what he plans to do with locations northward or farther south of Otterland. Erewhon is confident Belhaven will stay allied with him through monetary control specifically, and Melisande will continue allying because they are surrounded by shattered kingdoms, referring to Eelway and Fenharrow, and Terrasen at this time has no money to leverage for alliances at this time. Erewhon says Aelin Galathinius will have reached her seat by now, and when Rifthold is gone, she will also find how very alone she is in the north. Brandon's heir has no allies on this continent. Not anymore. This comment makes it clear that Erewhon's strategy at this time seems to be to isolate Terrasen and choke them off from access to allies or reinforcements.
This does give me a little hope for Aelin because he doesn't even consider that she will rally allies off the continent, like in the Dead Islands, for example, and he doesn't make any mention of allies potentially in Wendlin. So it does give me a little hope that maybe a patchwork quilt of random off-continent alliances will help them hopefully win the war.
Yeah, dude. The Red Desert, the Silent Assassins.
Ooh, the Silent Assassins.
Cliff,
Oh, I forgot about the Silent Assassins. Yes.
No. Yeah, everybody. I feel like everybody from Tab is going to come back.
Oh,
on this
hell yeah.
episode.
Except for Sam, because he's
Sam.
dead. But yeah, no, totally.
Rest
For
in
sure.
peace, Sam.
R.I.P., baby.
I did find it interesting that Erewhon briefly looks at Eelway, because I wonder if this suggests he is not quite confident in his ability to maintain control over that kingdom. We speculated that in Crown of Midnight, Nehemia and Elena may have actually been in spiritual cahoots together to get Aelin to act and see the bigger threat of the Valg and her fate. Nehemia also had pretty extensive knowledge of word marks, and that suggests Eelway is stronger than we know so far. I do also wonder if Eelway has had past fights against the Valg or something, and who knows.
I want you to say spiritual cahoots again.
Kind of funny, right? Spiritual cahoots.
But in all seriousness, I think his glance to Eelway is mostly indicative that they are most likely to align themselves with Aelin. We know based on TOG and Com that Eelway was the last holdout against the King of Adarlan, and basically all rebel activity was staged from there. Not to mention Nehemia, who basically told Aelin that Eelway was waiting for an opportunity to overthrow the King of Adarlan. As you said, Lorraine, I think it's possible they are stronger than we realize. But more importantly to me, I think it's possible they know more than everyone else. If they knew or even suspected about Erewhon or the Valg or anything of that nature, they could have been secretly preparing for years, because this is not a normal war, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about demons, dark magic, etc. And so, as you stated, they know about word marks. They clearly know more about
ancient magic.
And they would know more about like the word gate, word keys, things like that. And so it's possible that they've been preparing for this for generations. And that is my hope. I have not forgotten about Eelway. I have not forgotten about Nehemia. I honestly thought at this point Aelin would have already went to Eelway. I mean, I get why not, but I am hoping that we do at some point make our way there.
I think she will. I think that'll be one of the places that'll ally with her and that she'll come back to, I guess, for Nehemia, Manon strategically argues against the plan to destroy Rifthold, because if Erewhon were to, quote, wreck his own capital, why should they believe your claims of alliance? She then suggests he make an announcement that Dorian and Aelin are enemies to the continent, and then position themselves as liberators, not conquerors. So other rulers will think twice before allying with Terrasen. Manon's internal thoughts reveal her main motivation is worry that destroying Rifthold would unite everyone else against them, thus delaying the witch's return to the Wastes, since we know that that was the deal the King of Adarlan had originally promised in exchange for their help. Once again, Vernon surprises us by agreeing with Manon, and she thinks, what did Vernon know that she didn't? To be honest, I have no idea what Vernon could know at this time, but I'm going to bookmark that because we have never trusted Vernon, and we ain't about to start now.
I'm honestly not sure Vernon knows anything in particular. It just may be that he actually agrees with Manon and wants to stand in Erewhon's good graces, and he was making a gamble there. Maybe Manon's thought is right. He does need allies now that he's potentially leashed to Erewhon. I don't know. I still don't like Vernon. I still don't trust him. Don't care about him. Good riddance. But it is a little interesting.
Yeah. To end the meeting, Erewhon agrees with Manon's plan to only damage the city enough to instill fear, but he adds that they need to bring down the glass wall because, quote, destroying symbols can break the spirits of men as much as bloodshed. Whew. I gotta say, that was a pretty epic line from Erewhon, as much as I hate to say that. That glass wall is symbolic of many things: the end of a brutal and cruel king's conquest, a new order, and also Aelin's power and mercy. So
I thought the same thing. As soon as I read that, I was like, damn. And then I was like, damn it, Erewhon, don't say anything cool like that.
It also made me think of Adian's line in Heir of Fire when he said, symbols have power, Prince. You'd be surprised by the power this still wields in the north. what it does to convince people not to pursue foolhardy plans.
Ooh, that's a really good callback. Well, think about the white stag. I mean, that's the symbol, you know?
After the meeting, Manon and the 13 head to the armory to get their new armor before departing for Rifthold. I found it notable Manon wants to beat Iskra and the Yellowlegs to Rifthold because she doesn't trust them to appropriately, quote, destroy the city, and she worries that they'll try and kill Dorian themselves. I think this continues to feed into the breaking off of the 13 from the other covens. And we know there continues to be tension between Iskra and Manon for power, even if Manon is the wing leader of the aerial forces. She also adds perhaps she'd put an end to Iskra as well. Accidents happen all the time in battle. And I was like, is Manon going to try and make a move against Iskra?
Now that's a fight I'd like to see. I'd bet the farm on Manon. I bet all of Aelin's gold on Manon. I really hope so, man, because you know what? Iskra's another one. I don't hate her as much as I hate Granny B, but I don't like her.
She deserves a little whoop ass. Okay?
Hell yeah. I haven't forgotten when she pushed Manon into the pit with Titus and Abraxos. I haven't forgotten that.
Yeah. And how she almost tried to kill Petra and Keely.
Oh, she did kill Keely. Keely!
Oh,
no.
Keely did die. I know. I was like,
yeah. You know what? Never mind. I do hate Iskra as much as Granny B.
After orders, the rest of the 13 branch off to get their armor, and Manon pulls Ghislaine aside to ask what she knows about Erewhon. This is when Manon gets the history we'd previously learned from Aelin's POV scenes. But Ghislaine gives her the DL about Erewhon being one of 3 vowed kings, how he'd been defeated once by Brannon and Maeve, and then spent a long while rebuilding his army to come back for round 2 when Brannon was weak, only to be defeated again by Brannon's daughter, who we know as Elena. I did find it kind of funny that Astrid Sfortson says, it would seem legend is wrong, cause retweet.
And I will retweet that retweet because what the fuck, Elena? What the actual... Just kidding. I know she did the best she could. Well, I'm sort of kidding. Y'all know how
kind
I feel.
of.
Kind of.
Manon then goes to get her own armor, and the blacksmith reveals a masterfully crafted crowned helmet. I found this interesting because on one hand, it symbolizes the identity Manon has been expected to carry and fulfill as this kind of like a conqueror, a demon, and a weapon of fear, I guess. But I also found it notable that the design hides her face in shadow, revealing only her iron teeth, emphasizing that she's been shaped to be basically just like a ruthless war figurehead. On the other hand, I think it also foreshadows her inner conflict. As Manon begins to question her loyalty to the matron and obedience to Erewhon, it feels like the helmet is a symbol of the path that she's expected to take versus what Manon will individually decide for her own fate. It could also possibly represent Manon's future as Queen of the Wastes, but maybe it'll be like kind of under a new order, similar to what we see Aelin and Dorian trying to do for their kingdoms. Just before they depart for Rifthold, I found it really poignant that Manon thanks the blacksmith and that she'd even thought about how he might feel making armor that she'd wear, quote, while ending the lives of his countrymen. I think this continues to highlight Manon's shifting sense of self and morality, and that perhaps she doesn't have to be this ruthless, heartless being.
And ultimately that she is developing feelings. This is a very small example, but this is an expression of gratitude that the old Manon would have never given, especially to a basic-ass human male. I mean, like in Heir of Fire, she was like, I'm going to eat these men, you know?
Right.
And now she's thanking him for making her beautiful armor. That's a pretty big shift.
All right, so that ends chapter 3. Moving on to chapter 4.
Before we get into this chapter, I do have an overarching thought to provide, and that is essentially how this meeting with Darrow goes was pretty heavily foreshadowed back in Heir of Fire. In chapter 24, Aedion and Murtaugh are basically discussing who would ally with Aelin and fight with Terrasen against the King of Adarlan, and Murtaugh says, you'll want people who aren't afraid of Aelin or you. You'll want level-headed people who won't hesitate to ask the hard questions. Loyalty is earned, not given. And I want you to remember that part because in reality, Darrow owes Aelin nothing. And we'll talk about it more when we get there. But Aelin has, from our perspective, she's done things to earn their loyalty. But from Darrow's perspective, I can see why he does not feel that way. Murtaugh then goes on to say, but others might not be so easily convinced. She has 10 years to account for and a kingdom in ruin. Aedion then tries to defend Aelin, and he says she was a child, which is true. But then Murtaugh points out She is a woman now and has been for a few years. Perhaps she will offer an explanation, but until then, Edian, you must understand that others might not share your fervor, and others may take a good amount of convincing. And we talked about this back in Heir of Fire, that this was likely to become an issue for Aelin. Now, of course, at the time, that felt like so far away. I mean, we were so far from that even becoming a concern that we didn't really go into depth into it. But of course, now that we're actually confronted with this reality, Murtaugh was pretty spot on. And I wish that Aedion would have been able to be a little more open to accepting that and started having conversations with Aelin about that when they finally reunited back in Queen of Shadows, because they all seem very shocked by how things with Darrow goes. Like, they are like, wait, what? You're not just going to let us waltz into Orinth? So I just thought that was kind of interesting, that yet another masterful Easter egg that Sarah J. Maas planted for us.
So Aelin and her court arrive at the tavern after scouting the area and enter inside for what is about to be a tense meeting.
First and foremost, when they go into the meeting, Lysandra shifts into her human form, and I thought it was hilarious when Aelin thinks, and true to her oath months ago, her once full breasts were now smaller.
Yeah.
Back in Queen of Shadows, Lysandra was complaining about how she had very large breasts and it hurt her back, and that she swore that would be the first thing to go. And she stuck to her word. And I just thought that was really funny. And then it says, like, Aelin gave a little smirk to Lysandra. Lysandra was like, right, say something. And even Rowan is like trying to hide his little smile. You know, it's pretty funny.
I first wanted to point out that Aelin thinks about Aedion, and it says, the Wolf of the North, who, even though he had won battles with his face, speed, and strength, had earned the respect and loyalty of his legion as a man. As a human, Aelin, still in her Fae form, wondered if she should have shifted herself. This thought touches on a theme we've been seeing since the beginning of the series. Humans are wary of magic wielders and the Fae, and the sentiment exists even among places like Terrasen, where Fae lineage existed before its downfall, though it doesn't seem like they really had many people who are full Fae by the time like Aelin's generation came around. It seems like any kind of Fae blood or Fae lineage was fairly diluted, and you had mostly just demi-Fae.
This is also confirmed by Darrow's reaction to seeing Rowan, which is definitely not positive. And we know historically, based on Elena's POV, things between the human and Fae were not great either, because she had that thought that was basically like, maybe in the next war, Fae and humans will fight together. And so honestly, I wasn't surprised to see Darrow's reaction to Rowan.
Aelin also reflects on Ren, Aldsbrook, and Murtaugh being present, both of whom still hadn't seen her yet, despite working on behalf of Terrasen and Aelin's cause for the past 10 years. I also love that Aelin reminded herself that she had promised, quote, she would not pretend to be anything but what she was. She had crawled through darkness and blood and despair. She had survived. We've been through all stages of Aelin's growth as a character, and this continues to be important because despite what Darrow and perhaps other Terrasen lords may assume about her past, Aelin never truly forgot or stopped thinking about her kingdom and fighting in her own way. She also knows the truth and uses that to keep pushing for what the true focus should be, because ultimately she knows her cause is much greater than just Terrasen or just individual kingdoms.
I really love that too. I love that she refused to play the political game and just try and appease them. She came exactly as who she was, no more and no less. I know she did have moments where she was trying to keep her temper, which I appreciate, but at the end of the day, I feel like she was still very much herself. Like, whenever he finally insults Aedion, she's like, whoa, you know, that's enough. You can insult me,
right.
but not Aedion. That's still very much a characterization of who she is.
They enter into the meeting room, and Aelin immediately spots Ren and Murtaugh, and we get a brief reminder of her encounter with them the night she'd gone to rescue Chaol back in Crown of Midnight. She also spots Lord Darrow assessing him as a predator and a man who was used to getting his way, to being obeyed without question. Not a warrior of the sword, but of the mind, similar to her great uncle Orlin, though Orlin had also been kind. Heavy emphasis on kind.
Heavy emphasis.
Things are tense immediately with Lord Darrow refusing to give anything more than a dip of his head, Ren being shocked that Aedion knew Aelin was alive and now traveled with her without telling him. And then you have Murtaugh, who's trying to ease the tension with offerings for refreshments. My initial impression of Darrow is that he sucks and he's infuriating due to the following comments and attitudes. I will touch back on more of an analysis of Darrow's attitude and motivation later, but for now I will simply say I am not a fan.
Well, as usual, I will be taking up the mantle of defending an unpopular character. We'll go more in depth line by line. And to be clear, I'm not defending everything he says, especially the way he talks about Lysandra. That was despicable, and his overall attitude and delivery. But I do understand, and I think there are some reasons in validity for some of his reservations and some of his behavior. Emotionally, I hate him. But politically, I understand him. Okay, so don't come for me. Don't come for me. I have to be honest, though, because I thought about this a lot. And if Aelin would have rolled up and all the lords would have been like, yes, our lost queen, I would have been like, this is bad writing. No one in their right mind is going to let a 19-year-old girl, which nothing to do against women, but in this world, I don't think they place a high value on women. To them, this 19-year-old basically girl child is coming up and is like, I'm here to take my throne. And these people are like, bitch, where were you for the last 10 years? And I think it would be unrealistic for it to occur that way. And so as much as I don't like it, I think it's better writing that that's how it goes.
Yeah, that's fair. So I took some deep breaths when he starts off by taunting Aelin, as she did as well, by saying, shall you burn me to ash, princess, melt my bones, and that some control would do her highness well. I think this was particularly bothersome to me because these statements connect to both like recent and past events, but in particular, the events of Aelin's childhood were not her fault. All of her outbursts and the accidental burnings were because no one actually taught her how to control anything. They didn't teach her about her magic because, they were afraid of Maeve finding out and just about magic in general and stuff. So that particular part really bothered me. I understand where Daro's coming from, and I talk about that later. But some of his particular things, I was like, okay, dude, like these are things that she had no control over, and you're trying to penalize her for something from when she was a child. And I'm like, that in particular, I was like, I don't agree with that.
See, I don't think it had anything to do with her as a child. I think it has everything to do with what she's done as an adult. Aelin has done some pretty amazing and also terrifying things with her power. I mean, she literally shattered and melted the glass castle into a giant wall. Any reasonable, normal human being, they're going to be nervous that someone can do that, that someone has that much power. And so honestly,
Fair.
I think he's afraid of her. And he's masking it with bravado because he knows she could do those things. And so he's doing this weird like reverse psychology, like, oh, will you burn me to ash? It doesn't make sense, but it kind of does. I also think that he's testing her maturity and control. He even tells her some control would do your highness well. We love Aelin, but she can be hot-headed, okay? The fire-breathing bitch queen. And by her own admissions throughout this chapter, she's working very hard to stay level-headed and in control. But I think from Dare's perspective, he just sees her as this kind of hot-headed 19-year-old who could literally melt your bones. Would you want them ruling your kingdom? We know Aelin. We know that's not who she is. We know how her goodness and her love and compassion for others, but he doesn't. He only knows what he's heard. And what he's heard is some pretty scary shit about her.
So another thing Daro says to be annoying, he refuses to recognize Lysandra's right to the land because she has no royal bloodline, which fair. However, it was purchased with money. And so, anyways, I won't get into that. I did love that she'd settled on a name. Lysandra decides to call this land Caraver. And I hope we get her reasoning for the name at some point, because I have no idea what that means. And obviously, we don't get the backstory on how she decided that, only that she woke up from a dream and was like, Caraver, So.
In ghost leopard form, trying to get cohesive to turn human. Yeah. I did a little research on the word, and cara in Latin means beloved or darling, and ver in French means glass. The literal translation is beloved glass, which I think could be a metaphor for how Aelin shattered the glass castle and freed magic, essentially liberating and freeing Lysandra from her quote-unquote prison, right? She was imprisoned to Clarice, and then she was also in the prison of her shape-shifting form that she was locked in on when magic went away. And so I thought maybe there might be some kind of connection there. I don't know if Lysandra will ever explain it, but if she does, maybe I'll be right, maybe I'll be wrong, but just based on research of actual word definitions and then a little bit of it.
I like that.
Me too. I liked it too.
A lot. And then my last little bullet point about Daro's initial words. He clearly despises Rowan for being Fae, and this is an extension of Terrason's mistrust of Maeve that we learned about back in Heir of Fire. So Rowan disperses some cups of water out at Lysandra's request, though he conducts a poison test with his magic first, which I thought was a cool little trick. Ultimately, the conversation shifts to Aelin's right to rule Terrasen, and I think a few details sum up Darrow's point of view. Darrow says any ruler of Terrasen must be approved by the ruling families of each territory, and that while Aelin might be the last living descendant of Brandon, there are other possibilities, other directions to go in should you be deemed unfit. This point in particular stuck out to me because it makes it clear bloodline alone doesn't mean Aelin can be queen. Instead, there have been checks put in place with an approval process that she has to win in order to earn her right to that seat, I guess. It's also clear Darrow views Aelin as immature because he says, you can hardly expect us to allow a 19-year-old assassin to parade into our kingdom and start gapping orders, regardless of her bloodline. Last but not least, Darrow disapproves of the court Aelin has created for herself and clearly has a mistrust of anything related to the Fae, including Rowan's presence, or even Aelin's embrace of Fae teachings, such as her bringing up that Rowan is her Karanam when he says to Rowan, why serve at Maeve's feet when you could rule beside Princess Aelin?
Let me first say the delivery and tone is bad. Okay, I think we can all agree on that. It's not good. But Darrow has some fair points, or rather, I should say, they're fair points from his perspective and limited worldview. We as readers know the whole story. We know Aelin's goodness, her compassion, her loving side, and everything she's been through and why she's made the choices she's made. But to Darrow, she's just a 19-year-old who just decided now to take this opportunity to roll in and is ready to take over. Darrow has essentially acted as king of Terrasen for the last 10 years during Otto's occupation, and he kept them from starving to death. Murtaugh says it, Aedion says it. He walked this very careful line of defying the king, but also keeping Terrasen from being completely wiped off the face of the earth. And to be honest, I don't think that Aelin does a good job of acknowledging this and showing appropriate gratitude. If I was Aelin, I'd lay it on thick because he did. He's kept Terrasen going for 10 years during the occupation. It's very possible without Darrow, there would have been nothing left of Terrasen to save. And so I don't think that anybody in the room does a good job of acknowledging that. And I can imagine if I was Darrow, I would be kind of annoyed that no one was like, hey, by the way, thanks for taking care of the kingdom.
True, yeah.
You know,
it's fair.
The point about Rowan is fair. We know Rowan, but I gotta admit, from the outside looking in, it does look a little suspicious. Remember, everyone in Orinth feared Maeve and her power. This was a regular discussion that went on. I mean, her parents were terrified that Maeve would come and try to get her. And Rowan, by his own admission, has literally brought down kingdoms with Lorcan. So I can see why Darrow would be like, he's scared of him, right? And
True.
I mean, he doesn't know all the intricacies of his blood oath to Maeve and how it was broken and everything. And so I won't lie, from his perspective, I see why he's kind of like, how convenient that you show up.
Right. Yeah.
So, just a little food for thought.
So next, Rowan asks if he's being accused of having taken the blood oath with dishonor, which of course shocks Darrow and Ren. I love that Rowan goes on to defend Aelin by stating, I've known many princesses with kingdoms to inherit, Lord Darrow, and I can tell you that absolutely none of them were ever stupid enough to allow a male to manipulate them that way. Least of all, my queen.
I did love Rowan. Rowan is so daddy for this. This is such a good response. And it's also a really good point. If Rowan really wanted to be king of some territory, I don't think he'd pick fucking Terrasen, okay? Terrasen is in ruins. They're destitute. Not a lot going on there. If I wanted to sleep my way to the top, it would not be in Terrasen. I'm going to tell you that right now. I want a nice, cushy kingdom, nice job, lots of wealth, not much work to do. I want the people to be happy and the king to be hot, okay? Yep. And so all Aelin's got going for her is she's hot and amazing, okay? But everything else, Terrasen, money, it's not looking good.
It's for love.
Oh, I know. Obviously, that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm like,
Yeah.
Even Darrow can't deny that because Terrasen's not exactly desirable,
So at this point, you think Darrow would be done with his taunting, which I did also pick up on the fact that this was likely a test aside from being just infuriating. But this time he moves on to Aedion instead. And I gotta say, I was kind of shocked when Darrow reveals there was a betrothal proposal on the table between Aedion and Aelin to unite Wendelin and Terrasen. But apparently Wendelin rejected the offer. I guess this does kind of explain why they were so close and also why Aedion was in Terrasen as an Ash River in the first place. Though we also see that this is shocking for both of them. So it's not like any of them knew that this was in place. Adian has expressed disdain toward Wendelin and his Ash River family for their lack of help when Terrasen fell, but I guess it just kind of like makes everything kind of worse to think about, knowing there was a betrothal, they rejected it, they never helped. Like, I'm speaking about Wendelin, they also never helped Terrasen in any way, so it's just all a mess. To continue, after more insults from Darrow and a warning dagger between his fingers from Aelin, Darrow continues to say, all the work I have done, all I have sacrificed these past 10 years has been in Orlan's name, to honor him and save his kingdom, my kingdom. I do not plan to let a spoiled, arrogant child destroy that with her temper tantrums. Did you enjoy the riches of Rifthold these past years, princess? Was it very easy to forget us in the north when you were buying clothes and serving the monster who butchered your family and friends? I would imagine that there is a strong desire to protect Terrasen, and also Darrow probably feels territorial over Terrasen because he was the one who navigated the political situation over the past 10 years. War in Adarlan's occupation has undoubtedly changed how everything is done because I think everyone had to adapt during that time or risk losing control entirely.
I think there's also this added element of calculated risk perspective. Darrow risked everything. Every day he lived with the risk of being killed by the King of Adarlan for his role in Terrasen. Whereas, I mean, I don't know what age you want to consider Aelin a woman, right? Able to make her own decisions, 15, 16, 17. But a lot of that time, she was in Rifthold, buying pretty dresses, enjoying fancy parties and things, and being an assassin. I know it's not as simple as that, but she could have left. She could have went to Terrasen. She could have done something, and she chose not to, and we know why, and I don't want to litigate that part of her decision-making. But I think what Darrow was touching on is that he risked everything while Aelin, from his perspective, risked nothing. And now expects to be rewarded, even though she didn't put her neck on the line, so to speak. But I guess, and just kind of retweeting what I said earlier, I do think Darrow is owed a lot of gratitude for keeping Terrasen alive during the occupation. I definitely understand how it looks that Aelin did actually work for the king. It looks bad. I get that. It really does. But also, Aelin survived. We wouldn't even be having this conversation if she hadn't done all the things she did because she'd be dead. So it's just... It's a tricky situation.
I understand where Darrow's coming from, and I think his experience and Aelin's experience and the fact that neither of them knows the other person's truth is probably a lot of like why there's so much tension. Mostly a large part of my annoyance with Darrow is not really about that stuff, but it kind of just goes back to him assuming Aelin was like a selfish, spoiled princess without any desire to learn what actually happened to her. He never asked her, what happened to you? She tells him she was in Endovir, and yet he doesn't care at all about any of that. And so I think that is the thing that really irks me about him. It's just his lack of trying to understand anything about why Aelin did any of the stuff that she did. But also, like, again, this is our first meeting with him. So maybe with time as we go through the book, like, that'll come to light. Yeah. So I'm going to just hold on to Adian's words about him being a tough bastard, but he's fair. But fair.
And he loved Orlan. Yes. No, I agree, though. He really doesn't make any effort to empathize and put himself in her position. So I do agree with that very strongly.
As we near the end of the chapter, Darrow asks if she will tell Terrasen's people the truth about her past as an assassin serving the enemy. But I had a lot of respect for Aelin when she stands her ground and says she will tell them the truth about her past and that the true enemy is in Morath, not Dorian. This continues to show, I think, a lot of the control Aelin has developed, as well as the fact that she is playing a larger game. Darrow and many people or other rulers, I would imagine, don't know the full impact of Erewhon being back again and what he's actually been building in Morath. I don't think they can honestly even comprehend it because nobody's seen anything like this. Like, it's been long forgotten history.
Oh, I totally agree. If they truly knew what they face, they would not be wasting time arguing over who gets to be king or queen. This would not even be a topic of conversation. Yeah, they have no idea. Well, I mean, Aelin does, but not Darrow.
Yeah. In the end, Darrow reiterates he doesn't recognize Aelin's right to rule or that she is the rightful queen of Terrasen, and neither do the lords of Sloane, Ironwood, and Gunnar, who make up the remaining surviving majority of what was once Orlan's court. He also points out that Adian and Lysandra have no formal land and thus no voting rights, and that even if the Allsbrook side with her, she is still outnumbered. Last but not least, he threatens war against Aelin if she decides to return to Orinth and seize her throne without invitation. So, anyways, that feels like a slap in the face. I, of course, was very angry and frustrated on Aelin's behalf, but all in all, this is what it feels like drives Darrow's attitude so far. Darrow sees Aelin as untrustworthy and dangerous, likely because she doesn't conform to the image of a ruler he's comfortable with. He doesn't see her as a fit ruler, nor does he approve of the type of court she has constructed for herself because it doesn't align with the traditional construction of things. I think Darrow also fears Aelin's connection with the Fae and views her alignment with Rowan, a full Fae, as a concern because we know Terrasen has always been wary of Maeve and the Fae. Plus, growing up, Aelin's magic wasn't revered or thought of as a gift. Instead, it was feared immensely because of how destructive it could be in its uncontrolled state. And my final point for now, I think Darrow does to some extent believe that he has earned the right to power and ruling status within Terrasen for navigating Otterlin's occupation for the past 10 years, and he doesn't believe Aelin sacrificed anything in the same way that he and others in Terrasen did, which is an unfair characterization of Aelin's past because we know how everything went, but ultimately, that's how Darrow sees it. Ultimately, I think he believes there needs to be more action to prove Aelin is capable of ruling. For example, securing alliances, money, or forces, because those are tangible assets that are useful in his eyes. Darrow is also a human, and therefore cannot comprehend just how, I think, fucked they really are against someone like Erwan.
I mean, it's true.
This is a journey that we've seen with Chaol already throughout Queen of Shadows, and so it makes sense that Darrow strategically thinks like a human as well. Plus, this is a completely unprecedented event in their lifetime, so he doesn't know, okay?
He don't know. He don't know what he don't know. No, Mimi,
Yeah.
I think these are all excellent points and very well said. I think to a certain extent, they're both right if you consider it from only their perspectives and worldview. But when you zoom out and see the larger picture, of course, we want Aelin to be queen, and we know that's what's best. So I definitely feel like Darrow went for some low blows, very disrespectful, especially to Lysandra, and, the comments about who Aelin was sleeping with and all that. And that was really uncalled for and ugly. And I don't approve of that. That's not how a gentleman should conduct himself, especially a High Lord of Terrasen. But overall, I understand. I think it's reasonable that they did not just welcome her with open arms as their new queen. And I'm proud of Aelin for handling it the way she did. That was very mature for her, which is a lot of growth for her.
Right. I agree with that. I do kind of wonder about what their interactions were when Aelin was a child, though. Because, Aelin has fond memories of Orlin being kind to her, but I was like, what was Darrow doing during this time? Because they were together, like Darrow and Orlin, and so it was like, has he always just hated Aelin? I don't
know. That's a good question.
Anyways, that ends chapter 4. Moving on to chapter 5. The meeting continues into the next chapter, where it's clear Darrow has no intention of honoring Aelin's bloodline, and the only thing he honors is the law. One generations of Galathinius rulers have honor. This definitely puts Aelin in a tough position. We all know that is Aelin's throne, but overstepping the law will easily be used against her to paint her as a tyrant or someone who has no concern for order, especially given that everyone knows about her power and that at this time, everyone assumes that she destroyed the glass castle in Rifthold. I was still dumbstruck when Darrow is unfazed by the idea of a Valg king preparing for war. And all he says is war is a game of numbers, not magic. Magic failed us once before. We will not trust it again. And I was like, what?
Oh, baby, you're about to find out the hard way.
Oh my god. From the context, it seems that the Battle of Theralis was the final one before Terrasen fell to Otterlin, and it seems like being outnumbered was, in Darrow's mind, the reason that they lost that battle.
That's fair. I think Darrow's words here are pretty damning. They really don't care how powerful Aelin's magic is. I think from his perspective, they relied on it once and it brought them despair and ruin. And so I can see why they're hesitant to rely on it again, because from his perspective, what's changed? What would make Aelin's magic any different from the magic they had access to before? And to a certain extent, I mean, numbers matter, right? As you said many times, I just don't think Darrow realizes what they're up against. It's definitely not going to be just a numbers game in this war specifically. So,
yeah, definitely not.
Yeah.
I will say, though, that Rowan and Aelin have discussed this idea before back in Heir of Fire when Rowan tells her, I've never been to your continent, but I heard the Fae there were gentler, less aggressive. Very few trained in combat, and they relied heavily on magic. Once magic was gone from your lands, many of them might not have known what to do against trained soldiers. And obviously, we know that the king had that planned since Dorian's birth, which occurred several years before Terrasen actually fell. And so it's been a long time coming. And if they weren't aware of that in Terrasen, then they just weren't prepared and they weren't trained in regular combat. So it also seems Darrow took this lesson to heart and realized that Terrasen was especially vulnerable when magic was suppressed, and they didn't have a well-trained army without magic. That's why I think he doesn't believe that it's useful. However, I am assuming he believes this without understanding the true power of the word keys and about kings, as we've been saying. Darrow also goes on to point out that at this time, Terrasen has no allies unless Aelin were to secure some forces through marriage. Ugh,
No.
that was devastating to read.
When I read that, I was like, oh no, oh no.
So we know that this tension over ruling expectations versus wants was first brought up by Dorian, who never really wanted to be king because he'd wanted freedom to choose his path for himself. And now we see Aelin is running into a similar issue with needing to balance her love for Rowan versus the expectation that as a royal, there is an obligation to marry for alliance.
As soon as I read that, I felt my heart fall out of my body. I was like, no, she can't have to marry for an alliance. I will not allow it. And the quote here was so good, I just have to read it. Aelin thinks, would this be the cost, not just in blood, but in dreams yielded? To be princess eternal, but never a queen. To fight with not just magic, but the other power in her blood, royalty. And I was like, well, my day's ruined, so...
No way. I don't see it happening. No freaking way.
I don't think so either. But I don't even like that it's hinted at.
I know. Darrow sets the expectation that if she ever wanted a chance to gain her seat as queen, she would need to find allies for Terrasen. Aelin warns once again, if we lose this war, darkness will reign forever, but Darrow remains unfazed. I feel like a little Valg or a little witch attack, and I'm sure Darrow's going to learn a hard lesson shortly.
Lorraine, I feel like you're just daring Darrow. You're like, okay, little man, fuck around and find out then. Like, you want that to happen.
I do. He's so annoying. He just, anyway.
Tell me how you really feel, baby. Tell me how you really feel.
Before the meeting ends, Aelin tells Ren there will always be a spot in her court for him because of how he helped Adian and Nehemia, regardless of his vote, which I thought was really mature of her.
I agree. I will say I was with Rowan. If Darrow said one more word about precious Nehemia, I would personally end him. That was where I drew the line. I was like, how dare you? Because he even literally called her a waste of life or something like that. I was like, I said a lot of curse words when I read that part. I was really like, beep, beep, beep. I was very unhappy.
I guess the way I read that, I thought he was bringing up Nehemia because he thought Nehemia was doing what a princess was expected to do, right? And so when he said she was a waste of a life, he meant like she shouldn't have been the one to die. Is that how you read it? Like she shouldn't have been the one to die because she was actually helping. That's how I read it.
Yeah, essentially. I need to go back and reread it. But either way, the connotation and the tone is not good. It's not good or respectful.
Exactly. Fuck Darrow. Just kidding.
No, you're not.
He needs to earn my respect, okay?
Oh, that's right. Okay, Queen Lorraine. Tell him.
Yes. Things take a turn when a messenger arrives to inform them of the Iron Teeth Witch's current route to attack Rifthold, thus fulfilling some of that foreshadowing from the little folks' wyvern gifts. Outside, Aelin quickly realizes Erewhon's plan to cut Terrasen off from the southern kingdoms if he took down Rifthold, and though there wasn't much to be done to save the city, they could still save Dorian. They realize Rowan was the only one who could get to Rifthold in time, and Aelin says Dorian is vital. Lose him, and we lose any support in Otterlin, and one of the few magic wielders who could stand against Morath. I know this is a very dire moment, but I am very pumped to see what the true extent of Dorian's magic is. We barely know anything other than that he is extremely powerful. He has a different kind of raw magic that likes to take the form of ice, but that's pretty much it.
Well, especially after what we saw that he could do at the end of Queen of Shadows. I don't know what weird power meld he and Aelin did, but I want more of that, okay? More of that. But I thought the exact same thing. I feel like this situation that has arisen may actually resolve my question about how the hell Dorian will learn to train his magic, because I talked about this a lot at the end of Queen of Shadows. I was like, okay, so they're just going to leave him there and he's going to do what? I mean, he's all alone. Who's going to teach him about his magic, how to tunnel into his well of power, all that stuff. And if he's with Rowan and or, Aelin and Rowan, however, when they link up again, then Rowan will be able to train him on his magic. And so I was wondering how Dorian would be reintegrated into the story, because I feel like any POVs of him just chilling in Rifthold would be pretty boring. So now it feels like this is how Sarah J. Maas is going to work him back into the fold and get him back with the group. And so I'm excited about that.
Right. Dorian.
I know, you little Dorian girl.
I missed him. Poor baby. So at this point, Aelin takes note of another gift left by the little folk, but we'll talk about it later. And then she goes on to give the following orders. Aedion is to tell Ren to prepare the Bane to press from the north, though they'll have to work around Darrow's orders since Aelin and her court cannot set foot into Corinth. She then tells Rowan to head south to Skulls Bay with Dorian, in anticipation of getting Captain Rolfe, the Pirate Lord from Tab, to join their cause through a letter of recommendation from either Ren or Murtaugh. And I was so excited about this. Captain Rolfe is coming back into play. And I kind of touched on this earlier already, but I was like, ooh, I wonder if, obviously this means that we're also going to see Ansel again from the desert story and everything too. So
yeah, Ansel, Irene, Rolfe. I'm still waiting to see Nox Owen back from TOG. There are a lot of people I'm waiting for them to come back. Yeah. But I'm just going to say, we knew it. We called it. We said all the way back in Tab that the characters would come back up again. And I can't wait to see Rolfe. I liked Rolfe a lot, so I'm excited to go back.
I did question a little bit, though, if Rolfe is going to be willing to work with her, given her shenanigans and how she destroyed his slave trade operation.
Whoops.
I feel no regrets on her behalf regarding that particular story. But, she's not in his good graces right now, I would imagine. So
I do think they'll be able to work something out. I have a feeling that Rolfe does not think highly of Parrington / Erewhon, because remember, the King of Otterland was using the Dead Islands to breed fog monsters, and I have a feeling Rolfe did not like that. And honestly, it probably killed any and all trade out of there. Having the Vogue presence there probably killed some of his men. So as much as Rolfe probably is not happy with Aelin, she has enough gold to make it right. Rolfe is a man of business. Okay, he's a man of money. And
he's a pirate. Like he loves that gold.
He loves the booty. He loves the booty, okay? And I feel like a little bit he takes things personally. And so I feel like Parrington and Erewhon slighted him more than Aelin did. So I think he'll come around.
Probably. That's fair, yeah. Finally, Aelin, Aedion, and Lysandra would head to the Dead Islands in the meantime and meet Rowan and Dorian there 2 weeks behind Rowan. So basically the strategy at this time being Skulls Bay will serve as their new base through which to unite any allies they gain in the north and the south so that they don't have to travel through the middle of the continent that is occupied by Erewhon's forces. So they'll use the waterways instead. And then from there, they'd basically try to sandwich Erewhon in the middle if they can get allies in the south as well. I hate to see Aelin and Rowan separate again, especially considering the stakes and the fact that Rowan is taking 2 vials of poison with him in case they get caught. But with a kiss goodbye and a reminder that they will find each other again, Rowan shifts into his hawk form and flies off for Rifthold. I also would like to point out that Aelin thinks a word flickered in her head, an answer and a challenge and a truth she immediately denied, ignored, not for herself, but for him.
Yep.
I wonder what that word could be. Mate, perhaps?
Oh man, I knew you were going to key on that shit so hard. I knew you were going to go feral for that.
Sure was.
I will even admit by this point, can someone just say it already? Damn. Just say that you're each other's mate. Let's get it done. But again, I'm not going to let this go. I don't understand how you can have 2 mates. I'm still not okay with that. I still don't like it. But right. I don't know.
After this, it's decided Evangeline would stay with Ren and Murtaugh for lady training. And I thought what Aelin tells Evangeline was really sweet. She says, stay with Lord Murtaugh, learn about his court and its workings, and protect my friend. Work your magic on these miserable old men while you're at it. Win me back my kingdom, Evangeline.
Oh.
And then connecting back to the little folks' crown gift Aelin gives to Evangeline, I think it could be likely Evangeline will become an official lady or something somewhere in Terrasen from all her lady training.
Oh, I like that. That's a good connection. I didn't even think about it.
The little
Hey, if she
folks
gets
get-
Aelin her kingdom back, give her whatever she wants, you know?
Right. Murtaugh returns with the letter of recommendation. Woo! And then Aelin proceeds to make 2 blood oaths. The first is for Murtaugh, and she promises that should anything happen to Evangeline, quote, you will burn. All of you. I was like, oh, the violent Aelin we love. I did find it really impactful, though, because while she promises to play by Darrow's rules, this is her own test for them in return. And she's testing their ability to protect and, quote, look after someone who could do them no good, gain them no wealth or rank. If they failed to do so, it would mean, quote, they deserve to perish. Aelin is basically telling Darrow that he better walk the talk if he wants to have control for now. And I think it's also a reminder that she understands innocent lives are at risk, and this war is about protecting the future first and foremost. I also really love Murtaugh. I think he understands that holding grudges about the past won't get them anywhere, and he isn't necessarily hardened or resentful of Aelin in the same way Darrow and Ren are for now.
I feel like Murtaugh is very underappreciated. He has done a lot for Terrasen and is genuinely trying to keep the peace between the Lords of Terrasen and Aelin. And really, Murtaugh just wants what's best for Terrasen. And so I just feel like he's very underappreciated because he's done a lot. Really think about when he's first introduced to Heir of Fire. I mean, just everything, his entire journey, what he's lost, what he's sacrificed.
Yeah.
You know what? Team Murtaugh. Murtaugh for king.
I know.
I mean, if it's Darrow or Murtaugh, I'd pick Murtaugh, you know?
Yeah, I agree with that. After that, Aelin makes a second blood oath aimed at Darrow, stating no matter what, she promises to help him if he calls for her aid. And she says, when the day comes and you crawl for my help, I will put my kingdom before my pride and not kill you for this.
Woo! Say that again.
Aelin turns away, and Darrow demands to know where she is going, indicating that Murtaugh had not told him of their plans to go to the Dead Islands. And I feel like Murtaugh is over Darrow's bullshit. But I think this is a good sign that there are more people on Aelin's side than Darrow believes, or that I think even we are aware of at this time.
I wrote, never let him know your next move. That's Murtaugh right there. But in all seriousness, I think it's just another way Murtaugh is really showing that he's really rooting for Aelin. He wants to help her whatever way he can. I do think he respects the process and traditions of Terrasen and thinks that she needs to find a way to earn the loyalty that he probably thinks she is owed, but I mean, she has to work for it.
Right. The groups had their separate ways, and Aelin takes a moment alone to go look at the gift that the little folk had left her. This time, it's noted it's a small effigy of Brandon's temple on the coast. It says on the sacred rock in its center, they'd created a white stag from raw sheep's wool. Aelin interprets this as an order signifying what she needed to obtain, and it's clear this will be Aelin's next mission, and it's a sign of something just for Aelin, because it says she was willing to listen, play along, even if it had meant telling the others only half the truth. I have no clue what this could be, but perhaps it's some other magical object or some knowledge related to her lineage with Brandon and her role as Mala's heir. I think those are like my best guesses at this time.
Honestly, I have no idea what it could be. I thought about it. I got nothing, but I'm dying to know. And now I'm like really excited. I'm like, yes, let's go to Brandon's temple. We're going to find some good shit out. That's my hope anyway.
A side quest is in the works. It does make me just a little bit nervous, though, that she doesn't want to tell anyone else about it, because that means it's probably going to be risky for her life or her future in some way. It gives me a little anxiety.
Yep. It's giving basically all of Queen of Shadows. Aelin is always dreaming and scheming and not telling anyone about the dangerous shit she's doing. And that's immediately what I thought of. I was like, oh no, what is she doing now?
Yeah. Before Aelin departs, she sees, quote, the Lord of the North standing watch deep in the forest. I think this is definitely symbolic of some divine guidance or intervention from Brannon or Mala's spirit. We know this war with Erewhon has been a long time coming, and what happens in this upcoming war will probably change the fate of the continent and possibly other worlds, with the word keys still at play and their potential to open up the word gates and stuff if they fall into Erewhon's hands.
We know that throughout the series, the Great White Stag, the Lord of the North, appears to her at pivotal moments for her character. For example, on the way to Endovir, she sees him. I think it signifies that this is a pivotal moment for Aelin's character, and it also represents hope that, maybe things will be okay. Saying that, I wish I believed it more. But I want to believe that. Okay, that's what I want.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, that now concludes our analysis portion. So now we just have our favorite moments to share to wrap up this episode. So my first favorite quote was when it said, the Lord of the North flickered down at her, perhaps the final gift of Mala to these lands. Perhaps a thank you to Elena herself and a farewell. Because for Terrasen, for Aurelia, Elena would walk into the eternal darkness lurking across the valley to buy them all a chance.
Ooh, literally got goosebumps. My first favorite quote is when it said, Aelin Galathynius, Queen of Terrasen, knew the time would soon come to prove just how much she'd bleed for Aurelia.
Also shiver-inducing.
Yep.
Aelin Ash River Galathynius.
She wasn't in league with Aelin Ash River Galathynius. She was Aelin Ash River Galathynius. You guys hang out with us, we're just going to say that all the time. And nameless is my prize.
Yep. Intrusive thoughts.
Yeah, intrusive. Live a little, Sardokian. Yeah.
Yep.
Just y'all are going to have so much fun with us. You don't even know.
My next favorite line was just the little moment when Aelin and everyone are camped in the forest, and I loved when Evangeline yells food and then Fleetfoot howls too, which then makes Lysandra growl, and then it says Rowan laughed again, and Aelin thought she might never get sick of it. That laugh, that smile.
Oh, that's so sweet. Sweet and funny. I like that one. I like when they're heading into the meeting with Darrow and Murtaugh and Ren at the tavern, and Lysandra says, bringing a wet dog into a covert meeting, very queenly.
My next favorite one was when it said, her family and her kingdom, two dreams long believed lost. She realized as the northern wind ruffled her hair that she would do anything, ruin herself, sell herself to protect. It's also ominous, but...
Yeah, I know. A lot of the quotes are like that. There's a big undertone of that.
Yeah.
I love the moment when Aelin extinguishes all the light in the room and she says to Darrow, I suggest, Lord Darrow, that you become accustomed to this, for if we lose this war, darkness will reign forever. And if that's not a way to make a statement, I don't know what is.
My next one I liked was actually from Manon, and it's when she says, full armor. She gave him a slashing grin. We don't want to make our grand appearance looking anything but our best.
I like that one too. I like when Rowan is getting ready to leave and he tells Aelin, you are my fire heart. Oh, swoon. Swoon.
Fire heart.
I know. I love that shit. I love it.
My last favorite one is when Aelin's talking to Aedion after the meeting, and she says, for now, I have no plans to lose this war because some old bastard has learned he likes playing king. Sassy.
My last favorite one is when Darrow says, where are you going? And she says, to call on old debts and promises, to raise an army of assassins and thieves and exiles and commoners, to finish what was started long, long ago. And there's something about that that's so punchy, right? It impacts. And I would just love if a band of assassins and thieves and exiles and commoners are the ones that saved Terrasen. And just like, in your face, Darrow, in your face.
Yeah, I forgot about them. And you're so right, because we were talking a lot about how Tab was coming into play. But we also had all of, as you mentioned, a lot of the characters from like Throne of Glass, from the Champions Tournament. And Nox. I forget who's all living. Yeah, Nox. I'm trying to remember. Was Paylor still alive? I think Paylor was still alive too, right?
I think so.
The young
poison. Yeah, the poison master. I don't know.
But yeah, and then Emerson, Luca, and Wendelin, possibly. So, ooh. And it's also like the sign that Aelin is just doing everything unconventionally. Like, she's not going a traditional route. She's breaking traditions. So, very excited. But yeah, that now concludes our episode. So thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Booked on Fantasy podcast. As always, we are so glad you found us. So please leave us a review, and follow us on Instagram, YouTube, or TikTok to keep up with us on a daily basis. That's all we've got for you guys today.
So live a little.
And we'll catch you all next week. Bye.
Bye. And stay tuned for some bloopers.
This includes Tab, TOG, Com, Hoff, and Queen of... I feel like that sounds weird when I get to QOS. Cos.
Quas.
I'm just going to say everything.
Madame Blackbeak stood at attention as she watched her grandmother's coven. Haven't had to say that word in a long time. Her coven. Woo! Okay. Only Evangeline and Fleetfoot. Fleetfoot. First, she would burn them all to ash if they...
Ass.
She'd burn them all to ass. That would be much funnier. She'd burn them all to ass. Why is that way better? It's funny how the changing one letter changes the entire meaning. Oh my God. Okay. Damn it, Lorraine. She would put her pride before her kingdom. Wait, put her kingdom before her pride, right? Yeah. Okay. I was like, wait a minute. Before her kingdom.
Before her kingdom.
Whoops. Okay.
We first met Ren and Murtaugh and Ren in Heir of Fire, but we learn... okay. And also just to give hold on.
And again, I'm talking like a handful of peeper. Peeper. Oh my God. Woo, I haven't had to say live a little in a while.
Live a little.